Bleh. Bleh, bleh, bleh. Hello, Mavis. I am late to stream, I think. I don't know when I told you guys I'd be here. I was watching TV, and by TV, I was watching friends play Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, as per usual. But I hope everyone's had a good day. Hello, Mantis, Spinsa, Zami, Aqua, Nano, and Captain Freestar. Welcome and welcome in. I hope you're ready for more. Charlotte's Web. Forgot what we were doing for a second. Oh, shoot. What did I type last time? Won't be looking at chat until chapter breaks. Chat amongst yourselves. Is that not how you spell amongst? Link to copy of book. Boop, boop, boop. There we are. Give that a little bit pinned. Bit of a pin. I think I spelled amongst like I was doing Among Us. And hello, Crimson. Welcome in. Mantis, everyone keeps saying Sparking Zero is incredible. It is. It's peak. It's even if you don't like super like Dragon Ball, I still think it's pretty peak. Because I don't know a lot of Dragon Ball, but there's like so many scenes and like what if scenarios that like I know the gist of what normally happens. And then I'm seeing like the what ifs and like the super cool moves that everyone's pulling off. And I'm like, gobsmacked. I'm like, holy moly. Absolute peem. Absolute peem, as some people would say. Apparently that's like the new word that people are using for peak. They're saying peem. I think it was like probably a spelling error that someone did somewhere and it's just caught on. But I keep catching myself saying peem and no one's questioned me on it. So I keep saying it. Yeah. What happened to me today? Today I took like a 2.5, kind of almost 3-hour walk. Because I was like, I woke up and from the moment I woke up, I looked outside and I was like, damn, looks like a wonderful day for a walk. And I actually did it for once when I look outside and go, nice day for a walk. Because I was like, I don't want to spend money, so I don't want to walk up to the shops like I usually do for my walk. I decided to take a nature walk. So I did that for like an hour and a half. And I looked at my Google Maps and I was like, oh, this trail seems to take me onto the road that's like, I can walk up to like the grocery store and I can go get coffee from a nice little coffee shop there. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. I need to learn how to read maps better because the detour I thought would just add 20 minutes to my journey added an entire hour to it. It added a whole ass hour. So I do need to get better at reading maps slightly and estimating time it takes me to do things. But it was a nice little walk. I had a lot of time to think about mostly D&D. It's pretty much all I thought about. I didn't think too hard about Munch stuff. I didn't make any new revelations, per se. Because apparently it's always bad when I do that, which I can't argue against, but whatever. I think, what was I thinking about? I know part of it was I was like, it's really fucked up that, like, because sessions are so far apart. It's like, I was thinking about how, like, I've had 2 months to spin Zach around in my brain, but I have to keep reminding myself, Dawn has only known him 1 day. So, like, I've been spinning him for 2 months. They're not even 24 hours into knowing each other yet. It's extremely sick and twisted. I think I was thinking about Adrian for a bit, too. And then I was thinking a lot about Annalise for the upcoming Grand Blue campaign. I was thinking about her. I still don't know exactly how I'm going to play her because I do still need some keep it to information, but like I have it mostly down. I think. I hope I'm going to, what's going to happen is I'm going to be like, yeah, I know my character and session 1's going to hit. And I'm going to start playing and I'm going to be like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Who's my character again? What did I say she was like? I don't remember. I think that's how it usually happens, you know? You like get an idea in your mind, then you start playing, and it's like, it's different now. It's change of plans. Put that baby in reverse for a second. That's enough talking, because we gotta lock in. Because I did not get halfway through the book last time. So we got to really put in the work today and get the rest of it done. Because we're on chapter 11. Anyone tuning in who's wanting to read along, we're on chapter 11, page 80 in the PDF that I have linked. Are we mad at 0 XP sessions for being too far apart? No, it's good that they're far apart because, well, A, not to stress everyone out, and B, it gives you time to think in between sessions. Good and bad thing. Good for probably others, maybe bad for me. I'm a chronic overthinker. But no, not mad. It's just how D&D is. I mean, you think about most D&D groups and all the memes about scheduling issues. A lot of D&D groups only meet like once a month. Not even. Sometimes it's like once every 3 months because that's when everyone's schedules line up. Although my last TTRPG group, we were all extremely, despite all being working individuals, we all had very normal work schedules. So we could do every single weekend. And it worked out for the most part. Although we had a lot of canceled sessions. So it'd be like, I woke up feeling really sick today, guys. Or like, someone just wouldn't show up and we'd have to just play something else. It was fun times. I will admit, I had been that person a couple times where I'm like, I'm too sick to play right now. But that was when I was DMing and I was super nervous. I pretend to be sick because I was so nervous about DMing. So I never offered a DM because I know what I'm like. I'll pussy out. Okay. Sorry, I swore. I shouldn't. I'm in children books mode. I should be swearing. Okay. I'm starting chapter 11, The Miracle. The next day was foggy. Everything on the farm was dripping wet. The grass looked like a magic carpet. The asparagus patch looked like a silver forest. On foggy mornings, Charlotte's Web was truly a thing of beauty. The morning, each thin strand was decorated with dozens of tiny beads of water. The web glistened in the light and made a pattern of loveliness and mystery, like a delicate veil. Even Lurvy, who wasn't particularly interested in beauty, noticed the web when he came with the pig's breakfast. He noted how clearly it showed up, and he noted how big and carefully built it was. And then he took another look, and he saw something that made him set his pail down. There, in the center of the web, neatly woven in block letters, it was a message. It said, "Some pig." Lurvy felt weak. He brushed his hands across his eyes and stared harder at Charlotte's Web. "I'm seeing things," he whispered. He dropped to his knees and uttered a short prayer. Then, forgetting all about Wilbur's breakfast, he walked back to the house and called Mr. Zuckerman. "I think you better come down to the pig pen," he said. "What's trouble?" said Mr. Zuckerman. "Anything wrong with the pig?" "Not exactly," said Lurvy. "Come and see for yourself." The two men walked silently down to Wilbur's yard. Lurvy pointed to the spider's web. "Do you see what I see?" he asked. Zuckerman stared at the writing on the web, and then he murmured some words. "Some pig." And then he looked at Lurvy. Then they both began to tremble. Charlotte, sleepy from her night's excursions, smiled as she watched. Wilbur came and stood directly under the pig. "Some pig," muttered Lurvy in a low voice. "Some pig," whispered Mr. Zuckerman. They stared and stared for a long time at Wilbur. Then they stared at Charlotte. "You don't suppose that spider," began Mr. Zuckerman, but he shook his head and didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he walked solemnly back up to the house and spoke to his wife. "Edith, something's happened," he said in a weak voice. He went to the living room and sat down, and Mrs. Zuckerman followed. "I've got something to tell you, Edith," he said. "You better sit down." Mr. Zuckerman sank into a chair. She looked pale and frightened. "Edith," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, "I think you had best be told that we have a very unusual pig." A look of complete bewilderment came over Mrs. Zuckerman's face. Homer Zuckerman, what in the world are you talking about? She said.
This is a very serious thing, Edith,
he replied.
Our pig is completely out of the ordinary.
What's so unusual about the pig? Asked Mrs. Zuckerman, who was beginning to recover from her scare.
Well, I don't really know yet,
said Mr. Zuckerman.
But we have received a sign, Edith. A mysterious sign. A miracle has happened on our farm. There's a large spiderwebs in the doorway of the barn cellar, and right over the pig pen. And when Lurvy went to feed the pig this morning, he noticed the web because it was foggy. And you know how spiders' web look in a very distinct fog. And right sprang in the middle of the web. There were some words. Some pig. The words were woven right into the web. They were actually part of the web, Edith. I know, because I have been down there and I've seen them. It says some pig, just as clear can be. There's no mistake about it. A miracle has happened, and a sign has occurred here, on Earth, right on our farm, that we have no ordinary pig.
Well, said Mrs. Zuckerman, it seems to me you're a little off. It seems to me we have no ordinary spider.
Oh no,
said Zuckerman.
It's a pig that's unusual. It says so right there in the middle of the web.
Maybe so, said Mrs. Zuckerman. Just the same, I intended to have a look at that spider.
It's just a common grey spider,
said Zuckerman. They then got up and together walked down into Wilbur's yard.
You see, Edith, it's just a common grey spider.
Wilbur was pleased to receive so much attention. Lurvy was standing there, and Mr. and Mrs. Zuckerman, all three, stood for about an hour, reading the words on the web over and over, and watching Wilbur. Charlotte was delighted with the way that her trick was working. She sat without moving a muscle and listened to the conversation of the people, when a small fly blundered into the web just beyond the word pig. Charlotte dropped down quickly, rolled the fly up, and carried it out of the way. After a little while, the fog lifted. The web dried off and the words didn't show up so plainly. The Zuckermans and Lurvy walked back to the house. Just before they left the pig pen, Mr. Zuckerman took one last look at Wilbur.
You know,
he said in an important voice,
I thought all along that our pig of ours was an extra good one. He's a solid pig. That pig is as solid as could be. You notice how solid he is around the shoulders, Lurvy?
Sure I do, said Lurvy. I've always noticed that pig. He's quite a pig.
He's long and he's smooth,
said Zuckerman. That's right, said Lurvy. He's as smooth as they can come. He's some pig. When Mr. Zuckerman got back to the house, he took off his work clothes and put on his best suit. Then he got into his car and drove to the minister's house. He stayed there for an hour and explained to the minister that a miracle had happened on the farm.
So far, said Zuckerman, only 4 people on Earth know about this miracle. Myself, my wife Edith, my hired man Lurvy, and you.
Don't tell anyone else. Don't tell anyone else, said the minister. We don't know what it could mean yet. But perhaps if I give some thought to it, I can explain in my next sermon next Sunday. There can be no doubt that you have a most unusual pig. I intend to speak about it in my sermon and point out the fact that this community has been visited by a wondrous animal. By the way, does that pig have a name?
Oh, yes,
said Mr. Zuckerman.
My niece calls him Wilbur. She's a rather queer child, full of notions. She raised a pig on a bottle and I brought him from her when he was a month old.
He shook hands with the minister and left. Secrets are hard to keep. Long before Sunday came, news had spread all over the country. Everybody knew that a sign had appeared in a spider's web on the Zuckerman's place. Everybody knew that the Zuckermans had a wondrous pig. People came from miles around to look at Wilbur and to read the words on Charlotte's web. The Zuckerman's driveway was full of cars and trucks from morning till night. Fords and Chevys and Buick Roadmasters and GMC pickups and Plymouths and Studebakers and Pickards and Dr. DeSotos with gyromatic transmissions and automobiles with rocket engines and Jeep station wagons and Pontiacs. The news of the wondrous pig spread clear into the hills, and farmers came rattling down in buggies and buck roads to stand hour after hour at Wilbur's pen, admiring the miraculous animal. All said they had never seen such a pig before in their lives. When Fern told her mother that Avery had tried to hit the Zuckerman spider with a stick, Mrs. Arble was so shocked that she sent Avery to bed without any supper as punishment. In the days that followed, Mr. Zuckerman was so busy entertaining visitors that he had neglected his farm work. He wore his good clothes all the time now, got right into them when he got up in the morning. Mrs. Zuckerman prepared special meals for Wilbur. Lurvy shaved and got a haircut, and his principal farm duty was to feed the pig while people looked on. Mr. Zuckerman ordered Lurvy to increase Wilbur's feeding from 3 meals a day to 4 meals a day. The Zuckermans were so busy with visitors, they forgot about other things on the farm. The blackberries got ripe, and Mrs. Zuckerman failed to put up any blackberry jam. The corn needed hoeing, and Lurvy didn't have time to hoe it. On Sunday, the church was full. The minister explained the miracle. He said the words on the spider's web proved that human beings must always be on the watch for coming of wonders. All in all, the Zuckerman's pig pen was the center of attraction. Fern was happy, for she felt that Charlotte's trick was working and that Wilbur's life would be saved. But she found that the barn was not nearly as pleasant. Too many people. She liked it better when she could be alone with her friends and the animals. And hello, Alex. That was chapter end. Leonix, spider webs are your new go-to for reliable information. Real. If it's written on the... Come on. You think people would go onto a spider web and lie? You know that Arthur meme? That's what I'm quoting that. If you couldn't tell. But welcome in. I'm going to take another little drink. Thank you for the hydrate. And get into reading chapter 12. I gotta be careful with the voices that I do. So if you notice a voice change, it's because I'm noticing it's being bad on my throat. And we gotta get through 100 more pages. All right. It would take a lot of effort to lie on a web. Exactly. Only spiders can lie on webs, and spiders don't know how to lie. As far as I know. Okay, this is page 80, chapter 12. A meeting. One evening, a few days after the writing appeared on Charlotte's web, the spider called a meeting of all the animals in the barn cellar. I shall begin by calling the roll. Wilbur. Here, said the pig. Gander. Here, 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 said the gander. You sound like 3 ganders, muttered Charlotte. Why can't you just say here? Why must you have to repeat everything? It's my idiosyncrasy, replied the gander. Goose, said Charlotte. Here, 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 said the goose. Charlotte glared at her. Goslings 1 through 7. Beep, 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 said the goslings. This is getting quite a meeting, said Charlotte. Anyone would think we had 3 ganders, 3 geese, and 21 goslings. Sheep. Yeah, replied all the sheep together. Lambs. Yeah. Answered all the lambs together. Templeton. No answer. Templeton. No answer again. Well, we're all here except the rat, said Charlotte. I guess we can proceed without him. Now, all of you must have noticed what's going on around here the last few days. The message I wrote on my web praising Wilbur has been received. The Zuckermans have fallen for it, and so has everyone else. Zuckerman thinks Wilbur is an unusual pig, and therefore he won't want to kill him and eat him. I dare say my trick will work and Wilbur's life can be saved. Hooray! Cried everyone. Thank you so much, said Charlotte. Now, I called this meeting in order to get suggestions. I need new ideas for a web. People are already getting sick of reading the words some pig. If anyone can think of another message or remark, I'll be glad to weave it into the web. Any suggestions for a new slogan? How about Pig Supreme? Asked one of the lambs. No good, said Charlotte. It sounds like a rich dessert. How about Terrific, Terrific, Terrific? Asked the goose. Cut that down to 1 terrific, It will do very nicely, said Charlotte. I think terrific might impress Zuckerman. But Charlotte, said Wilbur, I'm not terrific. That doesn't make a particle of difference, replied Charlotte. Not a particle. People believe almost anything they see in print. Does anyone here know how to spell terrific? I think, said the gander, it's TEEEEEEEEFCCCC. What kind of an acrobat do you think I am? Said Charlotte in disgust. I would have Saint Vitus dance to weave a word like that into my web. Sorry, said the gander. And then the oldest sheep spoke up. I agree that there's something new written in the web if Wilbur's life is to be saved. And if Charlotte needs help in finding the words, I think she can get it from our friend Templeton. The rat that visits the dump regularly has access to old magazines. He can tear out bits of advertisements and bring them up here in the barn cellar so that Charlotte has something to copy. Good idea, said Charlotte. But I'm not sure Templeton will be willing to help. You know how he is, always looking out for himself, never thinking of the other fellow. I bet I can get him to help, said the old sheep. I'll appease to his baser instincts, which he has plenty. Here, he comes now. Everybody quiet while I put up the matter to him. The rat entered the barn the way he always did, creeping up close to the wall. Hey, what's up? He asked, seeing the other animals assembled. We're holding a directors' meeting, replied the old sheep. Well, break it up, said Templeton. Meetings bore me. Then the rat began to climb a rope hung against the wall. Look, said the old sheep, next time you go off to the dump, Templeton, bring back a clipping of a magazine. Charlotte needs new ideas. She can write messages in her web to save Wilbur's life. Let him die. Wait. Hey, let him die, said the rat. I should worry. Sorry, I'm stuck in the Scottish accent. I can't find the Brooklyn one. You'll worry when the next winter comes, said the sheep. You'll all write on a zero morning in January when Wilbur's dead and nobody comes to put a nice pail of warm slops to pour into the trough. Wilbur's leftover food is your chief source of supply, Templeton. You know that. Wilbur's food is your food. Therefore, Wilbur's destiny and your destiny are closely linked. If Wilbur is killed and the trough stands empty day after day, you'll grow so thin we can look right through your stomach and see objects on the other side. Templeton's whiskers quivered. Maybe you're right, he said gruffly. I'm making a trip to the dump tomorrow afternoon. I'll bring back a magazine clipping if I can find one. Thanks, said Charlotte. The meeting is now adjourned. I have a busy evening ahead of me. I've got to tear my web apart and write terrific. Wilbur blushed. But I'm not terrific, Charlotte. I'm just average for a pig. You're terrific as far as I'm concerned, replied Charlotte sweetly. And that's what counts. You're my best friend, and I think you're sensational. Now stop arguing and go get some sleep. Chapter end. And welcome in, Kiddo Pop. Welcome. Haven't been here for a while. Is this like a new account for you? It says first time chat. Unless you've been lurking. Maybe you're a lurker. But welcome. Oh, shame you just woke up. This would be nice to sleep too. Yeah. That's why. For me, it's only like 7 p.m. But it's close enough at night. Oh, you lurk in the shadows. Ah, that makes sense. Well, welcome in. It's nice seeing you. Typing and chatting. I'm gonna take a quick drink break and then we'll get back. We are currently starting chapter 13, page... Well, this is... Okay, I can't tell you the pages actually because it still says I'm on page 80. Oh, I'm on page 98. Oh, it's 8:45. I'm guessing AM if you just woke up. Although there are night owls. Maybe it is PM for you. Up, 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 up. All right. Da, da, da. Gotta get back into it. Oh, okay. So you're like a night owl. It's PM. Understood. Understood. Well, maybe we'll set your sleeping records straight. Maybe you'll become a morning bird, because the bird gets the worm and the owl gets whatever it hunts at night. That makes sense. Okay. Ba ba ba. We lack in vitamin D. Yeah, if you live in Canada, they put vitamin D in the milk. You just need to become a milkaholic. I don't know about the States, though. Bash, bash, bash. At least in Western Canada, they do. I don't know about Eastern Canada, because we don't get enough sunlight in Western Canada, or at least in BC. I think they add vitamin D. I gotta start reading the rest. I'm gonna get into like milk conspiracies. Chapter 13, Good Progress. Far into the night, while other creatures slept, Charlotte worked on her web. First, she ripped out a few of the orb lines near the center. She left the radial lines alone, as they were needed for support. And as she worked, her 8 legs were a great help to her. So were her teeth. She loved to weave, and she was an expert at it. While she was finishing ripping things out, her web looked like this. There's a picture of it. You'll have to open 98 in the PDF to see. A spider can produce several kinds of thread. She used a dry, tough thread for the foundation lines, and she used a sticky thread for the snare lines, and ones that catch and hold insects. Charlotte decided to use her dry thread for writing the new message. If I write terrific with sticky threads, she thought, every bug that comes along will get stuck in it and spoil the effect. Now let's see, the first letter is T. Charlotte climbed to a point at the top left-hand side of her web. Swinging her spinners into position, she attached her thread, then dropped down. As she dropped, her spinning tubes went into action, and she let out thread. At the bottom, she attached the thread. This formed the upper right part of the letter T. Charlotte was not satisfied, however. She climbed up and made another attachment, right next to the first, and she carried the line down so that she had a double line instead of a single line. It'll show up better if I make the whole thing with double lines. She climbed back up, moved over an inch to the left, touched her spinnerets to the web, and carried a line from the right, forming the top of the T. She repeated this, making it double. Her 8 legs were very busy helping. Now for E. Charlotte got so interested in her work, she began to talk to herself, as though to cheer herself on. If you had been sitting quietly in the barn cellar that evening, you would have heard something like this. Now up for the R, up we go, attach, descend, payout line, whoa, attach, good, up you go, repeat, attach, descend, payout line, whoa, girl, steady now, attach, climb, attach, over to the right, payout line, attach, now right down, swing the loop, around and around, now into the left, attach, climb, repeat. Okay, easy, keep those lines together. Now, then, out and down, for the leg, R, payout line, whoa, attach, ascend, repeat, good girl. And so, talking to herself, the spider worked at her difficult task. When it was completed, she felt hungry. She ate a small bug that she'd been saving. Then, she slept. Next morning, Wilbur arose and stood beneath the web. He breathed the morning air into his lungs. Drops of dew catching on the sun made the web stand out clearly. When Lurvy arrived at breakfast, there was a handsome pig, and over him, woven neatly in block letters, was the word terrific. Another miracle. Lurvy rushed and called Mr. Zuckerman. Mr. Zuckerman rushed and called Mrs. Zuckerman. Mrs. Zuckerman ran to the phone and called the Arables. The Arables climbed into their truck and hurried over. Everybody stood at the pig pen and stared at the web and read the word over and over, while Wilbur, who really felt terrific, stood quietly swelling out his chest and swinging his snout from side to side. Terrific, breathed Zuckerman. in joyful admiration.
Edith, you better phone the reporter on Weekly Chronicle and tell him what has happened. He will want to know about this. He may want to bring a photographer. This isn't a pig in the whole state that's as terrific as our pig.
The news spread. People who had journeyed to see Wilbur when he was called some pig came back again now that he was terrific. That afternoon, when Mr. Zuckerman went to milk the cows and clean out the tie-ups, he was still thinking about what a wondrous pig he owned.
Lurvy,
he called.
There'll be no more cow manure thrown down in that pig pen. I have a terrific pig. I want that pig to have clean, bright straw every day for his bedding. Understand?
Yes, sir, said Lurvy.
Furthermore, said Mr. Zuckerman, I want you to start building a crate for Wilbur. I've decided to take that pig to the county fair on September 6th. Make the crate large and paint it green with gold letters.
What will the letters say? Asked Lurvy.
They should say, Zuckerman's famous pig.
Lurvy picked up a pitchfork and walked away to get some clean straw. Having such an important pig, he was going to mean plenty of extra work. He could see that. Below the apple orchard at the end of the path was a dump where Mr. Zuckerman threw all sorts of trash and stuff nobody wanted anymore. Here, in a small clearing hidden by young alders and wild raspberry bushes, was an astonishing pile of old bottles and empty tin cans and dirty rags, bits of metal and broken bottles, broken hinges and broken springs and dead batteries, and last month's magazines and old discarded dish mops and tattered overalls and rusty spikes, leaking pails and forgotten stoppers and useless junk of all kinds, including a wrong-sized crank for a broken ice cream freezer. Templeton liked the dump and knew it. There was a good hiding place there. Excellent cover for a rat, and there was usually a tin can with food still clinging to the inside. Templeton was down there now, rummaging around, and when he returned to the barn, he carried in his mouth an advertisement he had torn from a crumpled magazine. How's this? He asked, showing the ad to Charlotte. It says crunchy. Crunchy would be a good word to write in your web. Just the wrong idea, said Charlotte. Couldn't be worse. We don't want Zuckerman to think Wilbur is crunchy. Then he might start thinking about crisp, crunchy bacon and tasty ham. That would put ideas into his head. We must advertise Wilbur's noble qualities, not his tastiness. Go get another word, please, Templeton. The rat looked disgusted, but he sneaked away to the dump and was back in a while with a strip of cotton cloth. How's this? He asked. It's a label off an old t-shirt. Charlotte examined the label. It said pre-shrunk. I'm sorry, Templeton, she said, but pre-shrunk is out of the question. We want Zuckerman to think Wilbur is nicely filled out, not all shrunk up. I'll have to ask you to try again. What do you think I am, a messenger boy? Grumbled the rat. I'm not going to spend all my time chasing down to the dump after advertising material. Just once more, please, said Charlotte. I'll tell you what I'll do, said Templeton. I know where there's a package of soap flakes in the woodshed. It's got writing on it. I'll bring you a piece of the package. He climbed the rope that hung on the wall and disappeared through a hole in the ceiling. When he came back, there was a strip of blue and white cardboard in his teeth. There, he said triumphantly. How's that? Dip. Charlotte read the words, with new radiant action. Well, what does it mean? Asked Charlotte, who had never used soap flakes in her life. How should I know? Said Templeton. You asked for words and I brought them. I suppose the next thing you want me to do is fetch a dictionary. Together they studied the soap ad. With new radiant action, repeated Charlotte slowly. Wilbur, she called. Wilbur, who was asleep in the straw, jumped up. Run around, commanded Charlotte. I want to see you in action, to see if you're radiant. Wilbur raced to the end of the yard. Now back again, faster, said Charlotte. Wilbur galloped back, his skin shone, and his tail a fine tight curl in it. Jump in the air, cried Charlotte. Wilbur jumped as high as he could. Keep your knees straight and touch the ground with your ears, called Charlotte. Wilbur obeyed. Do a backflip with a half twist in it, cried Charlotte. Wilbur went over backwards, raving and twisting as he went. Okay, Wilbur, said Charlotte. You can go back to sleep. Okay, Templeton, the soapbox ad will do, I guess. I'm not sure Wilbur's action is exactly radiant, but it's interesting. Well, actually, said Wilbur, I feel radiant. Do you? Said Charlotte, looking at him with affection. Well, you're a good little pig, and radiant you shall be. I'm in this thing pretty deep now. I might as well go to the limit. Tired from his romp, Wilbur lay down in the clean straw. He closed his eyes. The straw seemed scratchy, not as comfortable as the cow manure, which was awfully, delightfully soft to lie in. So he pushed the straw to one side and stretched out in the manure. Wilbur sighed. It had been a busy day. His first day of being terrific. Dozens of people had visited his yard during the afternoon, and he had to stand and pose looking as terrific as he could. Now he was tired. Fern had arrived and seated herself quietly on the stool in the corner. Tell me a story, Charlotte, said Wilbur as he lay down waiting for sleep to come. Tell me a story. So Charlotte, although she too was tired, did what Wilbur wanted. Once upon a time, she began, I had a beautiful cousin who managed to build her web across a small stream. One day, a tiny fish leaped into the air and got tangled in the web. My cousin was very much surprised, of course. The fish was thrashing wildly. My cousin hardly dared tackle it, but she did. She swooped down and threw great masses of wrapping material around the fish and fought bravely to capture it. Did she succeed? Asked Wilbur. It was a never-to-be-forgotten battle, said Charlotte. There was a fish caught only by one thing, and its tail wildly thrashing and shining in the sun. There was the web sagging dangerously under the weight of the fish. How much did the fish weigh? Asked Wilbur eagerly. I don't know, said Charlotte. There was my cousin slipping in, dodging out, beaten mercilessly over the head by a wildly thrashing fish, dancing in, dancing out, throwing her threads and fighting hard. First she threw a left around the tail. The fish lashed back, then a left to the tail and right to the midsection. The fish lashed back. Then she dodged to one side, threw a right, and another right to the fin. Then a hard left to the head, while the web swayed and stretched. Then what happened? Asked Wilbur. Nothing, said Charlotte. The fish lost the battle. My cousin wrapped it up so tight it couldn't budge. Then what happened? Asked Wilbur. Nothing, said Charlotte. My cousin kept the fish for a while, and when she was good and ready, she ate it. Tell me another story, begged Wilbur. So Charlotte told him about another cousin of hers who was an aeronaut. What's an aeronaut? Asked Wilbur. A balloonist, said Charlotte. My cousin used to stand on her head and let out enough thread to form a balloon, and then she'd let it go and be lifted into the air and carried upward on the warm wind. Is that true? Asked Wilbur. Or are you just making it up? It's true, said Charlotte. I have some very remarkable cousins, and now, Wilbur, it is your time to sleep. Sing something, begged Wilbur, closing his eyes. So Charlotte sang a lullaby while crickets chirped in the grass and the barn grew dark. This was the song she sang. I'm just going to read the lyrics. Sleep, sleep, my love, my only. Deep, deep in the dung and dark. Be not afraid and be not lonely. This is the hour when the frogs and thrushes praise the world from woods in the rushes. Raise from care my one and only, deep in the dung and the dark. But Wilbur was already asleep when the song ended. Then got up and went home. Chapter end. Why am I saying crunching bacon in chat? Okay, no, I looked up further up. I do read milk expiration dates. I don't think I've ever drank expired milk, but I'm always nervous about doing it, so I always check the expiry date, even if it's a freshly bought carton. But I'll check the expiry date and then I'll pour it, and if it's within 2 or 3 days of the expiration date, I'll give it a good sniff before I drink it. You'd think I'd smell it before I poured it, but I only smell it before pouring if it's cereal or I'm putting it in something else. Because I don't want to ruin cereal if it does smell sour. What do you mean I'm secretly an enjoyer of sour milk? What am I? No, I'm not. The problem is, like, when people say things like that, I can't defend myself because then people are gonna be like, the streamer doth protest too much. That's actually something I say to other people, but the streamer doth protest too much. And then people are gonna be like, now you sound really guilty of it because you're fighting so hard against this. And it's like, no. I've been tricked. I've put baby in a box over here. Oh my goodness. Okay. Let me take a minute, have another drink. We're on page 111, chapter 14. If I'm reading this correctly. Stop saying I like sour milk. I like sour candy. Sour Skittles are amazing until they rip off your taste buds. I don't like sour milk. Actually, you know, like the Pilk people used to drink for like challenges with like Pepsi and milk. I tried it with Coca-Cola and milk. It's surprisingly good. Like, not the best, but if you think about it, like, if you think, like, it's like a Coke float where you put ice cream over, like, a thing of Coke. It's pretty much just that, but you've melted the ice cream down and it's a lot less fatty and creamy because it's just regular milk. Like, I don't drink it regularly. I've only, like, drinked it for, like, a subathon stream where it was, like, you unlocked it by giving me money. Like, I was paid to do it. I've only ever drank it under the context of being paid to. But it wasn't terrible. Like, I wasn't gagging and throwing up. I was like, it's an okay taste. So don't do that emote at me. Don't do that emote at me. It's normal. I feel like I'm digging a hole, so I'm just gonna take one more drink and then do chapter 14. Selling out to the milkman. Hey, I'll sell out to a lot of things. There's a lot of things you could get me to do for 20 bucks. Okay. Chapter 14, Dr. Dorian. The next day was Saturday. Fern stood at the kitchen sink, drying the breakfast dishes as her mother washed them. Mrs. Arble worked silently. She hoped Fern would go out and play with the other children, instead of heading for the Zuckman's barn to sit and watch the animals. Charlotte is the best storyteller I've ever heard, said Fern, poking her dish towel into the cereal bowl. Fern, her mother said sternly, you must not vent things. You know spiders don't tell stories. Spiders can't talk. Charlotte can, replied Fern. She doesn't talk very loud, but she talks. What kind of story did she tell? Said Mrs. Arable. Well, began Fern, she told us about a cousin of hers who caught a fish in her web. Don't you think that's fascinating? Fern, dear, how would a fish get in a spider's web? Said Mrs. Arable. You know it couldn't happen. You're making things up. Oh, it happened all right, replied Fern. Charlotte never fibs. The cousin of hers built a web across the stream. One day she was hanging on the web and a tiny fish leaped into the air and got tangled in the web. The fish was caught by one fin, Mother. Its tail was wildly flashing and shining in the sun. Can't you just see the web sagging dangerously under the weight of the fish? Charlotte's cousin kept slipping in, dodging out, and she was beaten mercilessly over the head by the thrashing fish, dancing in, dancing out, throwing... Fern! Snapped her mother. Stop it. Stop inventing these wild tales. I'm not inventing, said Fern. I'm just telling you the facts. What finally happened? Asked her mother, whose curiosity began to get the better of her. Charlotte's cousin won. She wrapped the fish up, and then she ate him when she got good and ready. Spiders have to eat the same the rest of us. Well, I suppose they do, said Mrs. Arable vaguely. Charlotte has another cousin who's a balloonist. She stands on her head and lets a long line out and is carried aloft by the wind. Mother, wouldn't you simply love to do that? Yes, I would, come to think of it. replied Mrs. Arble. But, Fern, darling, I wish you would play outdoors today instead of going to your Uncle Homer's barn. Find some of your playmates and do something nice outdoors. You're spending too much time in that barn. It isn't good for you to be alone so much. Alone? Said Fern. Alone? My best friends are in the barn cellar. It's a very sociable place. Not at all lonely. Fern disappeared after a while, walking down the road towards the Ducklemans. Her mother dusted the setting room. As she worked, she kept thinking about Fern. It didn't seem natural for a little girl to be so interested in animals. Finally, Mrs. Arble made up her mind and she would pay a call on old Dr. Dorian and ask for his advice. She got in the car and drove to his office in the village. Dr. Dorian had a thick beard. He was glad to see Mrs. Arble and gave her a comfortable chair. It's about Fern, she explained. Fern spends entirely too much time in the Zuckerman's barn. It doesn't seem normal. She sits on a milk stool in the corner of the barn cellar near the pig pen and watches the animals hour after hour. She just sits there and listens. Dr. Dorian leaned back and closed his eyes. How enchanting, he said. It must be real nice and quiet down there. Homer has some sheep, doesn't he? Yes, said Mrs. Arble, but it all started with that pig we let Fern raise on the bottle. She called him Wilbur. Homer brought the pig, and ever since it left our place, Fern has been going to her uncle's to be near it. I have been hearing things about that pig, said Dr. Dorian, opening his eyes. They say he is quite the pig. Have you heard about the words that appeared in the spider's web? Asked Mrs. Arble nervously. Yes, replied the doctor. Well, do you understand it? Asked Mrs. Arble. Understand what? Do you understand how there could be any writing in the spider's web? Oh, no, said Dr. Dorian. I don't understand it. But, for the matter, I don't understand how a spider learned to spin a web in the first place. When the words appeared, everyone said they were a miracle, but nobody pointed out that the web itself is a miracle. What's miraculous about a spider's web? Said Mrs. Arble. I don't see why you say a web is a miracle. It's just a web. Ever tried to spin one? Asked Dr. Dorian. Mrs. Arble shifted uneasily in her chair. No, she replied. But I can crochet a dolly, and I can knit a sock. Sure, said the doctor. But somebody taught you, didn't they? My mother taught me. Well, who teaches a spider? A young spider knows how to spin a web without any instructions from anybody. Don't you regard that as a miracle? I suppose so, said Mrs. Arble. I never looked at it that way before. Still, I don't understand how those words got into the web. I don't understand it, and I don't like what I can't understand. None of us do, said Dr. Dorian, sighing. I'm a doctor. Doctors are supposed to understand everything, but I don't understand everything, and I don't intend to let that worry me. Mrs. Arble fidgeted. Fern says the animals talk to each other, Dr. Dorian. Do you believe that animals talk? Never heard one say anything, he replied, but that proves nothing. It proves possible that an animal has spoken civilly to me, but I didn't catch the remark because I wasn't paying attention. Children pay better attention than grown-ups. If Fern says the animals in Zuckerman's barn can talk, I'm quite ready to believe her. Perhaps if people talked less, animals would talk more. People are incessant talkers. I can give you my word on that. Well, I feel better about Fern, said Mrs. Arble. You don't think I need to worry about her? Does she look well? Asked the doctor. Oh, yes. Appetite's good? Well, she's always hungry. Sleep well at night? Oh, yes. Then don't worry, said the doctor. Do you think she'll ever start thinking about something besides pigs and sheep and geese and spiders? How old is Fern? She's 8. Well, said Dr. Dorian, I think she will always love animals, but I doubt that she spends her entire life in Homer Zuckerman's barn cellar. How about boys? Does she know any boys? She knows Henry Fussy, said Mrs. Arble brightly. Dr. Dorian closed his eyes again and went into deep thought. Henry Fussy, he mumbled. Remarkable. Well, I don't think you have anything to worry about. Let Fern associate with her friends in the barn if she wants to. I would say, offhand, that spiders and pigs were fully as interesting as Henry Fussy. Yet I predict the day will come when even Henry will drop some chance remark that catches Fern's attention. It's amazing how children change from year to year. How's Avery? He asked, opening his eyes wide. Oh, Avery, chuckled Mrs. Obel. Avery's always fine. Of course, he gets into poison ivy and stung by wasps and bees and brings frogs and snakes home and breaks everything he lays his hands on. He's fine. Good, said the doctor. Mrs. Obel said goodbye and thanked Dr. Dorian for his much advice. She felt greatly relieved. Ta-da! I had to explain myself after the chapter. What can I say? Like, I wouldn't do anything for $20. But I feel like there's a lot of things you could get me to do for $20. Like, I would do some jumping jacks. I could try and do squats. I need to learn how to do squats. I want to be like my hero, Zach Fair. I want to be like my main man, Zach Fair. Oh, you haven't been here for a while, Kiddo Pop. In D&D, Zach Fair showed up, and I've been obsessed with the man ever since. No, he showed up, and I was really normal about it because I didn't know who he was. And then my character held hands with him for like half an hour, and I looked up who he was, and I became very attached to this funky little Final Fantasy man. Okay, I wouldn't put my life in danger. Like, I wouldn't do anything that was like, it's like play Russian roulette for $20. I wouldn't do that. Like jump off this bridge over spiky rocks for $20. Okay, I wouldn't do that. But it's like embarrass yourself publicly for $20. Okay. Okay, yeah, I'll embarrass myself for $20. For 100K, yeah, I'd play Russian roulette. That's different. That's not $20. That's 100K. I don't know if I'll ever see 100K in one place in my life. That would be worth it to me. Maybe 500K. I think I'd still be scared for 100K. Maybe 500K I'd do Russian roulette. Yeah. You'd scream banana in public for $3 and you already have, Kyle? You know what? Yeah, based. Not to mention this, $20 in old money, so I had more value. Oh yeah, I'll go back in time and get $20. I'll be rich today. Oh, yeah. Anyone who doesn't know though, I do play. If you do !D&D, it will give you the channels that I, not channels, the channel that I play D&D on, because there's a new campaign. New campaign starting October 15th. At 7 p.m. MST. The same time as Kingdom Hearts, but a day later. Because I did get confirmation on Kingdom Hearts D&D. That is October 14th. Granblue D&D. That session 1. 15th. So if you're like, ah, man, I don't want to catch up on like 17 sessions of Kingdom Hearts D&D, but I want to see Ari play D&D. Yeah, you can do that on Tuesday. I mean, his NPC. No, it's not my campaign nor my channel. I'm just a player in it. I'm just a player in it, and it's just like a closed group thing. The game's very good though, and I have a lot of fun. That's why I plug it so much. I'm constantly plugging 0 XP official. Oh my goodness. Wait, no, there's okay. I meant to show you this. Not latest Dawn art, but it's my favorite Dawn art. I got, because I mentioned I was getting like a grabby face art for her. And it did come back because I got it off Mihuashi. So I don't have the artist's name because they don't have any socials linked on Mihuashi. But look, I do my baby girl. I love her so much. In what I'll say out loud is that's my hand squishing her face. In my sick, twisted, demented mind, that is Zach Ferris. And that's Zach Ferris' hand squishing her face. Oh my goodness. Oh, kiddo, you're a bag of coins. Chuck you at the bartender. I'll chuck you at the innkeep who everyone hates. Because he's been ripping us off. Least deranged VTuber. Well, I have my derangements. I have very large derangements, but so far my derangements have been normal ones with Zach Fair and Young Angeal recently dropped, and Young Angeal also is capturing my heart. But I think that's just because he looks very similar to Zach. Okay. No comment. Thanks, Alex. Simp. I am. I'm a terrible simp. No, because, okay. I'm gonna check to make sure there's nothing bad in my Twitter likes. And by bad, I just mean I haven't liked anyone's like private tweets. Oh, I have, unfortunately, but I'm scrolling through I've shown my Twitter likes before. They haven't really changed. Rufus Shinra is in here a little bit, and Angeal's now in my Twitter likes a little bit. But when you scroll through them, it's like Zach Fair, Rufus Shinra, Zach Fair, Zach Fair, Zach Fair. Like it's kind of just a consistent line of I only use Twitter to look at Zach art at the moment. If I see other things, that's on coincidence. Make the likes public. I wish. It's probably a good thing that likes are private because people would know how stuff's getting on their timeline. I can at least pretend to my mutuals on Twitter that it's like, oh, you're seeing like a lot of like Final Fantasy VII stuff. That's crazy. I don't know how that's getting on your feed. Meanwhile, I'm like looking at I don't even follow Zach Fair artists. They just come up in my algorithm because I like so much of it. I don't follow Daily Gungaga, but I still get daily me? Gungaga. I still get that on the daily. Public likes would be very funny. Back in my day, likes were on default public, and you couldn't hide them even if you wanted to. And then Elon Musk changed and ruined everything. Oh, your TikTok feed was looted by me for a hot minute a while back? Oh, I haven't posted a TikTok in a while. I keep saying I will make TikToks again. And then I'll record and I'll like go to edit it and I'm like, damn, this shit sucks. And then I just don't do anything. I've been a very harsh critic on myself, which is why I've been going on walks lately. I've been going on walks. It's helping a little bit. As much as I regretfully say that, touching grass, unfortunately, does help your mental state. It's sick and twisted. It's sick and twisted and unfortunately true. Which is probably like, it's good. It's good. Touch grass, guys. I don't know why I said that so depressed. Am I my biggest hater? Yeah. I don't really get hate mail. Now that I've said that, I'm gonna get hate mail, but I don't really think I get regular hate. I mean, I get the TikTok hate every now and again, but that's TikTok. That's TikTok. I don't pay mind to that. No. I had like an obsessed person for a little bit because I blocked them everywhere but Twitter because I was kind of worried for them. So I was like, I'll leave Twitter unblocked in case things go like code red. And I got messages for like 4 months despite never responding. And some of them were they were all very long messages. And occasionally I just I say occasionally, I didn't even open the messages until 4 months later. Because I was like messing with my friends. I was like, this is crazy. This guy keeps messaging me. I don't even read them. I finally opened it and I was like, holy shit, what the fuck is this? They're blocked now and everything. Truly a novel. Some of the messages are very scary. I didn't read them, but I recorded it and sent it to like a really close friend. And they're just like, hey, Ari, have you read these? And I was like, no. And they're like, maybe don't. And I was like, okay, yay. So to this day, I don't know what the guy sent me. Fucking novel of shit, though. I said I wasn't gonna swear. This definitely isn't for children. Sorry, I'm reading a children's book. No children allowed. Okay. Hope the guy's gotten better though. I say hope. I'm not touching that with a stick though. Okay. And going on to chapter 15, the crickets. The crickets sang in the grasses. They sang the song of summer's ending, a sad and monotonous song. Summer's over and summer's gone, they sang, over and over, gone. Summer is dying, dying. The crickets felt it was their duty to warn everybody that the summertime cannot last forever. Even on the most beautiful days in the whole year, the days when summer is changing into fall, the crickets spread the rumor of sadness and change. Everybody heard the song of the crickets. Avery and Fern Arable heard it as they walked the dusty road. They knew that school would soon begin again. The young geese heard it and knew that they would never be little goslings again. Charlotte heard it and knew that she hadn't much time left. Mrs. Zuckerman, at work in the kitchen, heard the crickets, and a sadness came over her too. Another summer gone, she sighed. Lurvy, at work building a crate for Wilbur, heard the song and knew it was time to dig potatoes. Summer's over and gone, repeated the crickets. How many nights till frost, sang the crickets. Goodbye, summer, goodbye, goodbye. Doop. The sheep heard the crickets, and they felt so uneasy that they broke a hole in the pasture fence and wandered into the field across the road. The gander discovered the hole and led his family through, and they walked to the orchard and ate apples and were lying on the ground. A little maple tree in the swamp heard the cricket song and turned bright red with anxiety. Wilbur was now the center of attraction on the farm. Good food and regular hours were showing results. Wilbur was a pig any man would be proud of. One day, there were 100 people who came to stand at his yard and admire him. Charlotte had written the word radiant, and Wilbur really looked radiant as he stood in the golden sunlight. Ever since the spider had befriended him, he had done his best to live up to his reputation. When Charlotte's Web said some pig, Wilbur tried hard to look like some pig. When Charlotte's Web said terrific, Wilbur had tried to look terrific. And now that the web said radiant, he did everything possible to make himself glow. It's not easy to look radiant, but Wilbur threw himself into it with a will. He would turn his head slightly and blink his long lashes. Then he would breathe deeply. And when the audience grew bored, he would spring into the air and do a backflip with a half twist. At this, the crowd would yell and cheer. How's that for a pig? Said Mr. Zuckerman would ask, well pleased with himself. That pig is radiant. Some of Wilbur's friends in the barn worried and feared all this attention would go to his head and make him stuck up, but it never did. Wilbur was modest. Fame did not spoil him. He still worried about the future, as he could hardly believe that a mere spider would be able to save his life. Sometimes at night he would have a bad dream. He would dream that men were coming to get him with knives and guns, but that was only a dream. In the daytime, Wilbur usually felt happy and confident. No pig ever had truer friends, and she realized that friendship is one of the most satisfying things in the world. Even the song of crickets did not make Wilbur too sad. He knew it was almost time for the county fair, and he was looking forward to the trip. If he could distinguish himself at the fair and maybe win some prize money, he was sure Zuckerman would let him live. Charlotte had her own worries, but she kept quiet about them. One morning, Wilbur asked her about the fair. You're going with me, aren't you, Charlotte? He said. Well, I don't know, replied Charlotte. The fair comes at a bad time for me. I shall find it inconvenient to leave home even for a few days. Why? Asked Wilbur. Oh, I don't feel like leaving my web. Too much going on around here. Please come with me, begged Wilbur. I need you, Charlotte. I can't go to the fair without you. You've got to come. No, said Charlotte. I believe I better stay home and see if I can get some work done. What kind of work? Asked Wilbur. Egg laying. It's time I made an egg sack and filled it with eggs. I didn't know you could lay eggs, said Wilbur in amazement. Oh, sure, said the spider. I'm versatile. What does versatile mean? Full of eggs? Asked Wilbur. Certainly not, said Charlotte. Versatile means I can turn with ease from one thing to another. It means I don't have to limit my activities spinning and trapping and stunts like that. Why don't you come with me to the fairgrounds and lay your eggs there? Pleaded Wilbur. It'll be wonderful fun. Charlotte gave her web a twitch and moodily watched it sway. I'm afraid not, she said. You don't know the first thing about egg-laying, Wilbur. I can't arrange my family duties to suit the management of the county fair. When I get ready to lay eggs, I have to lay eggs, fair and all fair. However, I don't want you to worry about it. You might lose weight. We'll leave it this way. I'll come to the fair if I possibly can. Oh, good, said Wilbur. I knew you wouldn't forsake me just when I needed you most. All that day, Wilbur stayed inside, taking life easy in the straw. Charlotte rested and ate a grasshopper. She knew that she couldn't help Wilbur much longer. In a few days, she would have to drop everything and build the beautiful little sack that would hold her eggs. Chapter end. Oh, and hello, Burger. Welcome in. And welcome in, Iron Chaseman as well. Welcome in. Oh my goodness. Okay. Am I seeing bad eating habits in chat? You eat proper meals, I say as someone who needs to eat better as well. I had chicken strips for dinner though. That's technically a meal. Chicken strips and fries, that's technically a meal. I cooked them myself. They were frozen and I put them in the air fryer. I put them in the air fryer, but with semantics. All right. Well, I'm trusting you guys are eating well. I'm gonna go on to chapter 16 because we gotta lock in before my voice starts going. You haven't ate dinner yet, Alex. You've got the rest of this book to go get dinner. All right, chapter 16, page 124 of the PDF that is linked. Off to the fair. The night before the county fair, everyone went to bed early. Fern and Avery were in bed by 8. Avery lay dreaming when the Ferris wheel had stopped and he was in the top car. Fern lay dreaming that she was getting sick in the swings. Lurvy was in bed by 8:30. He lay dreaming that he was going to throw baseballs at a cloth cat and winning a game of genuine Navajoed blanket. Ooh. I forgot how to read for a second, sorry. Mr. and Mrs. Zuckerman were in bed by 9. Mrs. Zuckerman lay dreaming about a deep freeze unit. Mr. Zuckerman lay dreaming about Wilbur. He dreamt that Wilbur had grown until he was 116 feet long and 92 feet high, and he had won all the prizes at the fair and was covered with blue ribbons and even had a blue ribbon tied to the end of his tail. Down in the barn cellar, the animals too went to sleep early, all except Charlotte. Tomorrow would be fair day. Every creature planned to get up early and see Wilbur off on his great adventure. When morning came, everyone got up at daylight. The day was hot. Up the road at the Arable's house, Fern lugged a pail of hot water to her room and took a sponge bath. Then she put on her prettiest dress because she knew she would see boys at the fair. Mrs. Arable scrubbed the back of Avery's neck, wet his hair, parted it, brushed it down hard till it stuck to the top of his head. A whole bit about 6 hairs stood straight up. Avery put on clean underwear, clean blue jeans, and a clean shirt. Mr. Arable dressed, ate breakfast, then went out and polished his truck. He had offered to drive everyone to the fair, including Wilbur. Bright and early, Lurvy put clean straw in Wilbur's crate and lifted it into the pig pen. The crate was green. In gold letters it said, Zuckerman's Famous Pig. Charlotte had her web looking fine for the occasion. Wilbur ate his breakfast slowly. He tried to look radiant without getting food in his ears. In the kitchen, Mrs. Zuckerman suddenly made an announcement. Homer, she said to her husband, I'm going to give that pig a buttermilk bath. A what? Said Mr. Zuckerman. A buttermilk bath. My grandmother used to bathe her pig with buttermilk when it got dirty. I just remembered. Wilbur's not dirty, said Mr. Zuckerman proudly. He's filthy behind the ears, said Mr. Zuckerman. Every time Lurvy slops him, the food runs down around the ears, so it dries and forms a crust. He also has a smudge on one side where he lays in manure. He lays in clean straw, corrected Mr. Zuckerman. Well, he's dirty. He's going to have a bath. Mr. Zuckerman sat down weakly and ate a donut. His wife went to the woodshed. When she returned, she wore rubber boots, an old raincoat, and she carried a bucket of buttermilk and a small wooden paddle.
Edith, you crazy,
mumbled Zuckerman, but she paid no mind to him. Together they walked to the pig pen. Mrs. Zuckerman wasted no time. She climbed in with Wilbur and got to work. Dipping her paddle in buttermilk, she rubbed him all over. The geese gathered round to see fun, and so did the sheep and the lambs. Even Templeton poked his head out cautiously to watch Wilbur get a buttermilk bath. Charlotte got so interested, she lowered herself on a dragline so she could see better. Wilbur stood still and closed his eyes. He could feel the buttermilk trickling down his sides. He opened his mouth and some buttermilk ran in. It was delicious. He felt radiant and happy. When Mrs. Zuckerman got through and rubbed him dry, he was the cleanest, prettiest pig you ever saw. He was pure white, pink around the ears and snout, and smooth as silk. The Zuckermans went up to change into their best clothes. Lurvy went to shave and put on his plaid and purple necktie. The animals were left to themselves in the barn. The 7 godlings paraded around and around their mother. Please, please, please take us to the fair, begged the goslings. All 7 of them began teasing to go. Please, 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 please. They made quite a racket. Children, snapped the goose, we're staying quietly home. Only Wilbur is going to the fair. Just then, Charlotte interrupted. I shall go too, she said softly. I've decided to go with Wilbur. He may need me. We can't tell what may happen at the fairgrounds. Someone's got to go along who knows how to write. And I think Templeton better come too. I might need someone to run errands and do general work. Hey, I'm staying right here, grumbled the rat. I ain't got the slightest interest in fairs. That's because you've never been to one, remarked the old sheep. A fair's a rat's paradise. Everybody spills food at a fair. A rat can creep out late at night and have a feast. In a horse barn, you'll find oats that trotters and pacers has spilled. In the trampled grass of the infield, you'll find old discarded lunch boxes containing the foul remains of peanut butter sandwiches, hard-boiled eggs, cracker crumbs, bits of donuts, and particles of cheese. In the hard-packed dirt of the midway, after glaring lights are out and the people have gone to bed, you'll find a veritable treasure of popcorn fragments, frozen custard dribblings, candied apples abandoned by tired children, sugared fluff crystals, salted almonds, popsicles, partially gnawed ice cream cones, and wooden sticks of lollipops. Everywhere is loot for a rat, in tents and booths and haylofts. Why, a fair is enough disgusting leftover food to satisfy a whole army of rats. Templeton's eyes were blazing. Is that true? He asked. Is this appetizing yarn of yours true? I like high living, and what can you say tempts me? It's true, said the old sheep. Go to the fair, Templeton. You'll find the condiments at the fair will surpass your wildest dreams. Buckets of sour mash sticking to 'em, tin cans containing particles of tuna fish, greasy paper bags stuffed with rotten. That's enough, cried Templeton. Don't tempt me any more. I'm going. Good, said Charlotte, winking at the old sheep. Now then, there's no time to be lost. Wilbur will soon be put in the crate. Templeton and I must get into the crate right now and hide ourselves. The rat didn't waste a minute. He scampered over to the crate, crawled between the slats, and pulled straw up over him so he was hidden from sight. All right, said Charlotte. I'm next. She sailed into the air, let out a dragline, and dropped gently to the ground. She climbed to the side of the crate and hid herself inside a knothole in the top board. The old sheep nodded. What a cargo, she said. That sign ought to say Zuckerman's famous pig and 2 stowaways. Look out, the people are coming, shouted the gander. Cheese it, cheese it, cheese it. The The big truck, with Mr. Arable at the wheel, backed slowly towards the barnyard. Lurvy and Mr. Zuckerman walked alongside. Fern and Avery were standing in the body of the truck, hanging onto the signboards. "Listen to me," whispered the old sheep to Wilbur. "When they open the crate to try and put you in, don't struggle. Don't go in without a tussle. Pigs will always be resisted when they're being loaded." "If I struggle, I'll get dirty," said Wilbur. "Never mind that. Do as I say. Struggle. If you were to walk into the crate without resisting, Zuckerman might think you're bewitched. He'd be scared to go to the fair." Templeton poked his head up through the straw. "Struggle if you must," said he, "but kindly remember, I'm hiding down here in this crate. I don't want to be stepped on or kicked in the face or pummeled or crushed in any way or squashed or buffeted about or bruised or lacerated or scarred or biffed. Just watch what you're doing, Mr. Radiant, when they're shoving you in." "Be quiet, Templeton," said the sheep. "Pull in your head. They're coming. Look radiant, Wilbur. Lay low, Charlotte. Talk it up, geese." The truck backed slowly into the pig pen and stopped. Mr. Arable cut the motor, got out, walked around to the rear and lowered the tailgate. The geese cheered. Mrs. Arable got out of the truck. Fern and Avery jumped to the ground. Mrs. Zuckerman came walking down from the house. Everybody lined up at the fence and stood for a moment, admiring Wilbur and the beautiful green crate. Nobody realized that the crate already contained a rat and a spider. "That's some pig," said Mrs. Arble. "He's terrific," said Lurvy. "He's very radiant," said Fern, remembering the day he was born. Well, said Mrs. Zuckerman. "He's clean anyway. The buttermilk certainly helped." Mr. Arable studied Wilbur carefully. "Yep, he's a wonderful pig," he said. "It's hard to believe that he was the runt of a litter. You'll get some extra good ham and bacon, Homer, when time comes to kill the pig." Wilbur heard these words, and his heart almost stopped. "I think I'm going to faint," he whispered to the old sheep who was watching. "Kneel down," whispered the old sheep. "Let the blood rush to your head." Wilbur sank to his knees, all radiance gone. His eyes closed. "Look!" screamed Fern. "He's fading away." "Hey, watch me!" yelled Avery, crawling on all fours to the crate. I'm a pig! Avery's foot touched Templeton under the straw. "What a mess," thought the rat. "What fantastic creatures boys are. Why'd I let myself in for this?" The geese saw Avery in the crate and cheered. "Avery, you must get out of this crate that instant," commanded his mother. "What do you think you are?" "I'm a pig," cried Avery, tossing a handful of straws into the air. Like. "The truck's rolling away, Papa," said Fern. The truck, with no one at the wheel, had started to roll downhill. Mr. Arable dashed to the driver's seat and pulled the emergency brake. The truck stopped. The geese cheered. Charlotte crouched and made herself as small as possible in the knothole so Avery couldn't see her. "Come out at once," cried Mrs. Arable. Avery crawled out of the crate on his hands and knees, making faces at Wilbur. Wilbur fainted away. "The pig has passed out," said Mrs. Zuckerman. "Throw water on him." "Throw buttermilk," suggested Avery. The geese cheered. Lurvy ran for a pail of water. Fern climbed into the pen and knelt by Wilbur's side. "It's sunstroke," said Zuckerman. "Heat's too much for him." "Maybe he's dead," said Avery. "Come out of this pig pen immediately," cried Mrs. Arable. Avery obeyed his mother and climbed into the back of the truck so he could see better. Lurvy returned with cold water and dashed it on Wilbur. "Throw some on me," cried Avery. "I'm hot too." "Oh, keep quiet," hollered Fern. "Keep quiet." Her eyes were brimming with tears. Wilbur, feeling the cold water, came to. He rose slowly to his feet while the geese cheered. "Ease up," said Mr. Arble. "I guess there's nothing wrong with him." "I'm hungry," said Avery. "I want a candied apple." "Wilbur's all right now," said Fern. "We can start. I want to take a ride at the Ferris wheel." Mr. Zuckerman and Mr. Arable and Lurvy grabbed the pig and pushed him headfirst towards the crate. Wilbur began to struggle. The harder the men pushed, the harder he held back. Avery jumped down and joined the men. Wilbur kicked and thrashed and grunted.
Nothing's wrong with this pig,
said Mr. Zuckerman, cheerfully pressing his knee against Wilbur's behind.
All together now, boys. Shove!
With a final heave, they jammed him into the crate. The geese cheered. Lurvy nailed some boards across the end, so Wilbur couldn't back out. Then, using all their strength, the men picked up the crate and heaved it aboard the truck. They did not know that under the straw was a rat, and inside the knothole was a big gray spider. They only saw a pig.
Everybody in,
called Mr. Arble. He started the motor. The ladies climbed in beside him. Mr. Zuckerman and Lurvy and Fern and Avery rode in the back, hanging onto the sideboards. The truck began to move ahead. The geese cheered. The children answered their cheer. And away, everyone went to the fair. Chapter end. Thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. The homeless guy introduced. Yeah. Hey, no, it was the old sheep. It wasn't a homeless guy. Hey, never underestimate the power of condiments for a rat. I'm not a condiments guy, but I know like people who do like, they'll just like drink ketchup or like mustard. Or like, I don't know if anyone eats just like mayonnaise straight up out of the jar. There's got to be one person out there who does that. Maybe. I don't know. But thank you so much for the follow. They're kept anonymous. Don't worry about your name being said. I've read it, haven't said it. We're going to start with chapter 17 in a second. I'm just going to make sure my throat is okay. We're on page 136 of the PDF listed. We started at page 80. We've made it almost 60 pages in 1 hour, 25 minutes. We got about 60 pages to go. We're gonna have to lock in. Okay. Chapter 17, Uncle. When they pulled into the fairgrounds, they could hear music and see the Ferris wheel turning in the sky. They could smell dust of the racetrack where the sprinkling cart had moistened it, and they could smell hamburgers frying and see balloons aloft. They could hear sheep bleating in their pens. An enormous voice over the loudspeaker said, "Attention, please. Will the owner of a Pontiac car, license H2439, move your car away from the fireworks shed?" "Can I have some money?" asked Fern.
"Can I too?"
asked Avery. "I'm going to win a doll by spinning a wheel and it will stop on the right number," said Fern.
"I'm going to steer a jet plane and make it bump into another one."
"Can I have a balloon?" asked Fern.
"Can I have a frozen custard and cheeseburger and some raspberry soda pop?"
asked Avery. "You children be quiet until we get the pig unloaded," said Mrs. Arble.
"Let the children go up by themselves," suggested Mr. Arble. "The fair only comes once a year."
Mr. Arble gave Fern 2 quarters and 2 dimes. He gave Avery 5 dimes and 4 nickels.
"Now run along," he said. "And remember, money has to last all day. Don't spend it all in the first few minutes. And be back here at the truck at noontime so we can have lunch together. And don't eat a lot of stuff that's going to make you sick to your stomachs."
"And if you go on those swings," said Mrs. Arble, "you hang on tight. You hang on very tight, hear me? And don't get lost," said Mrs. Zuckerman. "And don't get dirty. And don't get overheated," said their mother.
"Watch out for pickpockets,"
cautioned their father. "And don't cross the racetrack when the horses are coming," cried Mrs. Zuckerman. The children grabbed each other by the hand and danced off in the direction of the merry-go-round toward the wonderful music and wonderful adventures and wonderful excitement into the wonderful Midway, where there would be no parents to guard them and guide them, and they could be happy and free to do as they pleased. Mrs. Arable stood quietly and watched them go. Then she sighed. She blew up her nose. "Do you really think it's all right?" she asked.
Well, they've got to grow up sometime, said Mr. Arvel, and a fair's a good place to start, I guess.
While Wilbur was being unloaded and taken out of his crate and into the new pig pen, crowds gathered to watch. They stared at the sign, Zuckerman's Famous Pig. Wilbur stared back and tried to look extra good. He was pleased with his new home. The pen was grassy, and it was shaded by the sun by a shed roof. Charlotte, watching her chance, scrambled out of the crate and climbed a post onto the underside of the roof. Nobody noticed her. Templeton, not wishing to come out in broad daylight, stayed quietly under the straw at the bottom of the crate. Mr. Zuckerman poured some skim milk into Wilbur's trough, pitched the clean straw into his pen, and then he and Mrs. Zuckerman and the Arables walked away to the cattle barn to look at the purebred cows and to see the sights. Mr. Zuckerman particularly wanted to look at the tractors. Mrs. Zuckerman wanted to see a deep freeze. Lurvy wandered off by himself, hoping to meet friends and have some fun on the Midway. As soon as the people were gone, Charlotte spoke to Wilbur. "It's a good thing you can't see what I see," she said. "What do you see?" asked Wilbur. "There's a pig in the pen next to yours, and he's enormous. I'm afraid he's much bigger than you are." "Maybe he's older than I am and more time to grow," suggested Wilbur. Tears began to come out of his eyes. "I'll drop down and take a closer look," Charlotte said. She then crawled along a beam until she was directly over the next pen. She let herself down on a track line until she hung in the air just in front of the big pig's snout. "May I have your name?" she asked politely. The pig stared at her. "No name," he said in a big hearty voice. "Just call me Uncle." "Very well, Uncle," replied Charlotte. "What's the date of your birth? Are you a spring pig?" "Sure, I'm a spring pig," replied Uncle. "What did you think? I was a spring chicken? Ha 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 ha. That's a good one, eh, sister?" "Mildly funny," said Charlotte. "I've heard funnier ones, though. Glad to have met you. And now I must be going." She ascended slowly and returned to Wilbur's pen. "He claims he's a spring pig," reported Charlotte. "And perhaps he is. One thing's certain, he has a most unattractive personality. He's too familiar, too noisy, and he cracks weak jokes. Also, he's not anywhere near as clean as you are, nor as pleasant. I took quite a dislike to him in our brief interview. He's going to be a hard pig to beat, though, Wilbur, on account of his size and weight. But with me helping you, it can be done." When are you going to spin a web?" asked Wilbur. "This late afternoon, if I'm not too tired," said Charlotte. "The least thing that tires me these days. I don't seem to have the energy I once had. My age, I guess." Wilbur looked at his friend. She looked rather swollen, and she seemed listless. I'm awfully sorry to hear that you're feeling poorly, Charlotte," he said. "Perhaps if you spin a web and catch a couple of flies, you'll feel better." "Perhaps," she said wearily, "but I feel like the end of a long day." Climbing upside down to the ceiling, she settled in for a nap, leaving Wilbur very much worried. All morning, people wandered past Wilbur's pen. Dozens and dozens of strangers stopped to stare at him and admire his silky white coat, his curly tail, his kind and radiant expression. Then they would move on to the next pen, where the bigger pig lay. Wilbur heard several people make favorable remarks about Uncle's great size. He couldn't help overhearing these remarks and couldn't help worrying. And now with Charlotte not feeling well, he thought. Oh dear. All morning, Templeton slept quietly under the straw. The day grew fiercely hot. At noon, the Zuckermans and the Arables returned to the pig pen. Then, a few minutes later, Fern and Avery showed up. Fern had a monkey doll in her arm and was eating Cracker Jack. Avery had a balloon tied to his ear and was chewing a candied apple. The children were hot and dirty. "Isn't it too hot?" asked Mrs. Zuckerman. "It's terribly hot," said Mrs. Arable, fanning herself with an advertisement of a deep freeze. One by one, they climbed into the truck and opened lunch boxes. The sun beat down on everything. Nobody seemed hungry. When are the judges going to decide about Wilbur? Asked Mrs. Zuckerman. Not till tomorrow, said Mr. Zuckerman. Lurvy appeared, carrying an Indian blanket that he had won. This is just what we need, said Avery. A blanket. Of course it is, replied Lurvy, as he spread the blanket across the sideboards of the truck so it was like a little tent. The children sat in the shade under the blanket and felt better. After lunch, they stretched out and fell asleep. Chapter end. Make sure to drink lots of water. I am. I'm halfway through my glass. And thank you so much. Wait, did I already say thank you for that follow? I think I did. Oh my goodness. I forget what happens by the end of each chapter. But I'm going to pause. I'm going to stop speaking for a second just to like massage my throat a little bit. We're going to be starting with chapter 18, page 144 of the PDF in just 1 second. Maybe have a stretch first as well. Okay. Oh my goodness, sorry, I'm taking a bigger stretch than I thought. Oh my goodness. Okay, chapter 18. The cool of evening. In the cool of evening, where shadows darkened at the fairgrounds, Templeton crept from the crate and looked around. Wilbur lay asleep in the straw. Charlotte was building a web. Templeton's keen nose detected many fine smells in the air. The rat was hungry and thirsty. He decided to go exploring. Without saying anything to anyone, he started off. Bring me back a word, Charlotte called after him. I shall be writing tonight for the last time. The rat mumbled something to himself and disappeared into the shadows. I'm going to hiccup. Sorry about that. He did not like being treated like a messenger boy. After the heat of the day, and the evening came as a welcome relief to all. The Ferris wheel was lighted now. It went round and round in the sky, and seemed twice as high by the day. There were lights on the midway, and you could hear the crackle of gambling machines, and the music of the merry-go-round, and the voice of the man in the Bing & booth, calling numbers. The children felt refreshed after their nap. Fern met her friend Henry Fussy, and he invited her to ride with him in the Ferris wheel. He even bought a ticket for her, so it didn't cost anything. When Mrs. Arable happened to look up into the starry sky and saw her little daughter sitting with Henry Fussy and going higher and higher into the air, and saw how happy Fern looked, she just shook her head. My, she said. Henry Fussy, think of that. Templeton kept out of sight. In the tall grass behind the cattle barn, he found a folded newspaper. Inside it were leftovers of someone's lunch. A deviled ham sandwich, a piece of Swiss cheese, part of a hard-boiled egg, and the core of a wormy apple. The rat crawled in and ate everything. Then he tore a word out of the paper, rolled it up, and started back to Wilbur's pen. Charlotte had her web almost finished when Templeton returned, carrying the newspaper clipping. She had left a space in the middle of the web. At this hour, no people were around the pig pen, so the rat and the spider and the pig were by themselves. I hope you brought a good one, Charlotte said. It's the last word I'll ever write. Said Templeton, unrolling the paper. What does it say? Asked Charlotte. You'll have to read it for me. It says humble, replied the rat. Humble? Said Charlotte. Humble has two meanings. It means not proud, and it means near the ground. That's Wilbur all over. He's not proud and he's near the ground. Well, I hope you're satisfied, sneered the rat. I'm not going to spend all my time fetching and carrying. I came to this fair to enjoy myself, not deliver papers. You've been very helpful, Charlotte said. Run along now if you want to see more of the fair. The rat grinned. I'm going to make a night of it, he said. That old sheep was right. The fair's a rat's paradise. What a eating, what a drinking, and everywhere good hiding, good hunting. Bye, my humble Wilbur. Fare thee well, Charlotte, you old schemer. This'll be a night to remember in a rat's life. He vanished into the shadows. Charlotte went back to work. It was quite dark now. In the distance, fireworks began popping off, rockets scattering fiery balls into the sky. By the time the Arables and the Zuckermans and Lurvy returned to the grandstand, Charlotte had finished her web. The word humble was woven neatly in the center. Nobody noticed it in the darkness. Everyone was tired and happy. Fern and Avery climbed into the truck and laid down. They pulled the Indian blanket over them. Lurvy gave Wilbur a forkful of fresh straw. Mr. Arvel patted him. "Time to go home," he said to the pig. "See you tomorrow." The grown-ups climbed slowly into the truck, and Wilbur heard the engine start, and then heard the truck moving away in a low speed. He would have felt lonely and homesick had Charlotte not been with him. He never felt lonely when she was near. In the distance, he could still hear the music of the merry-go-round. As he was dropping off to sleep, he spoke to Charlotte. "Sing me that song again about the dung in the dark," he begged. "Not tonight," she said in a low voice. "I'm too tired." Her voice didn't seem to come from her web. "Where are ya?" asked Wilbur. "I can't see you. Are you on the web?" "I'm back here," she answered. "Up in this back corner." "Why aren't you on your web?" asked Wilbur. "You almost never leave your web." "I've left it tonight," she said. Wilbur closed his eyes. "Charlotte," he said after a while, "do you really think Zuckerman will let me live and not kill me when the cold weather comes? Do you really think so?" "Of course," said Charlotte. "You're a famous pig and you're a good pig. Tomorrow you'll probably win a prize, and the whole world will hear about you. Zuckerman will be proud and happy to own such a pig. You have nothing to fear, Wilbur. Nothing to worry about. Maybe you'll live forever. Who knows? And now, go to sleep." For a while there was no sound. Then Wilbur's voice. "What are you doing up there, Charlotte?" "Oh, making something," she said. "Making something as usual." "Is it something for me?" asked Wilbur. "No," said Charlotte. "It's something for me, for a change." "Please tell me what it is," begged Wilbur. "I'll tell you in the morning," she said. "When the first light comes into the sky, and the sparrows stir and the cows rattle their chains, when the rooster crows and the stars fade, when the early cars whisper along the highway, you look up here and I'll show you something. I'll show you my masterpiece." Before she finished the sentence, Wilbur was asleep. She could tell by the sound of his breathing that he was sleeping peacefully, deep in the straw. Miles away at the Arable's house, the men sat around the kitchen table, eating a dish of canned peaches and talking over the events of the day. Upstairs, Avery was already in bed and asleep. Mrs. Arable was tucking Fern into bed. "Did you have a good time at the fair?" she asked as she kissed her daughter. Fern nodded. "I had the best time I ever had anywhere in my life, in my whole life." "Well," said Mrs. Arable, "isn't that nice?" Chapter end. And thank you so much for the follow. Thank you. Oh, I missed a pet as well. Thank you belatedly for that. Gotta have another drink. We're going on to chapter 14, page 150 of the PDF. Gonna have another drink, rest my voice for a second. Be right back. All right, chapter 14, the egg sack. Next morning, when first light came into the sky, and the sparrows stirred in the trees, when the crows rattled their chains, and the rooster crowed, and the early automobiles went whispering along the road, Wilbur awoke and looked for Charlotte. He saw her up overhead in a corner near the back of his pen. She was very quiet. Her 8 legs were spread wide. She seemed to have shrunk during the night. Next to her, attached to the ceiling, Wilbur saw a curious object. It was a sort of sack or cocoon. It was peach-colored and looked as though it was made of cotton candy. "Are you awake, Charlotte?" he said softly. "Yes," came the answer. "What is that nifty little thing? Did you make it?" "I did indeed," replied Charlotte in a weak voice. "Is it a plaything?" "Plaything? I should say not. It is my egg sack, my magnum opus." "I don't know what a magnum opus is," said Wilbur. "That's Latin," explained Charlotte. "It means great work. This egg sack is my great work, the finest thing I've ever made." What's inside it? Asked Wilbur. Eggs? 514 of them, she replied. 514? Said Wilbur. You're kidding. No, I'm not. I counted them. I got started counting, so I just kept on, just to keep my mind occupied. That's a perfectly beautiful egg sack, said Wilbur, feeling as happy as though he had constructed it himself. Yes, it is pretty, replied Charlotte, patting the sack with her two front legs. Anyway, I can guarantee that it is strong. It is made out of the toughest material I have. It is also waterproof. The eggs are inside and will be warm and dry. Charlotte, said Wilbur dreamily, are you really going to have 514 children? If nothing happens, yes, she said. Of course they won't show up till next spring. Wilbur noticed that Charlotte's voice sounded sad. What makes you sound so downhearted? I should think you'd be terribly happy about this. Oh, don't pay any attention to me, said Charlotte. I just don't have much pep anymore. I guess I feel sad because I won't ever see my children. What do you mean you won't see your children? Of course you will. We'll all see them. It's going to be a simply wonderful thing next spring in the barn cellar with 514 baby spires running all over the place, and the geese will have a new set of gosling, and the sheep will have their new lambs. Maybe, said Charlotte quietly. However, I have a feeling that I'm not going to see the results of last night's effort. I don't feel good at all. I think I'm languishing, to tell you the truth. Wilbur didn't understand the word languish, and he hated to bother Charlotte by asking her to explain. But he was worried. He felt he had to ask. What does languishing mean? It means I'm slowing up, feeling my age. I'm not young anymore, Wilbur, and I don't want you to worry about me. This is your big day today. Look at my web. Doesn't it show up well with the dew on it? Charlotte's web has never looked more beautiful than it looked this morning. Each strand held dozens of bright drops of early morning dew. The light from the east struck it and made it plain and clear. It was a perfect piece of designing and building. In another hour or two, a steady stream of people would pass by, admiring it and reading it, and looking at Wilbur and marveling at the miracle. As Wilbur was studying the web, a pair of whiskers and a sharp face appeared. Slowly, Templeton dragged himself across the pen and threw himself down in a corner. I'm back, he said in a husky voice. What a night. The rat was swollen to twice his normal size. His stomach was big around as a jar of jelly. What a night, he repeated hoarsely. What a feast. And a carousing, a real gorge. I've eaten the remains of 30 lunches. Never have I ever left leavings. And everything well ripened and seasoned with the passage of time and heat of the day. Oh, it was rich, my friends. Rich. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, said Charlotte in disgust. It would serve you right if you had an acute attack of indigestion. Hey, don't worry about my stomach, snarled Templeton. It can handle anything. And by the way, I got some bad news. I came past that pig next door, the one that calls himself Uncle. Noticed a blue tag in front of his pen. That means he won first prize. Guess you licked, Wilbur. You might as well relax. Nobody's gonna hang a medal on yous. Furthermore, I wouldn't be surprised if Zuckerman changes his mind about you. Wait until you get a hankering for some fresh pork, smoked ham, crisp bacon. He'll take you to the knife, my boy. Be still, Templeton, said Charlotte. You're too stuffed and bloated to know what you're saying. Don't pay any mind to him, Wilbur. Wilbur tried not to think about what the rat had just said. He decided to change the subject. Templeton, said Wilbur, if you weren't so dopey, you would have noticed that Charlotte had made an egg sack. She's gonna be a mother. For your information, there are 514 eggs in that peachy little sack. Is that true? Asked the rat, eyeing the sack suspiciously. Yes, it is true, sighed Charlotte. Congratulations, mumbled Templeton. This has been a night. He closed his eyes and pulled some straw over himself and dropped off into a deep sleep. Wilbur and Charlotte were glad to be rid of him for a while. At 9 o'clock, Mr. Arable's truck rolled into the fairgrounds and came to a stop at Wilbur's pen. Everybody climbed out. "Look," said Fern. "Look at Charlotte's Web. Look what it says." The grown-ups and children joined hands and stood there, studying the new sign.
"Humble," said
Zuckerman.
"Now, isn't that just the word for Wilbur?"
Everyone rejoiced to find the miracle of the web had been repeated. Wilbur gazed up lovingly into their faces. He looked very humble and very grateful. Fern winked at Charlotte. Lurvy soon got busy. He poured a bucket of warm slops into the trough, and while Wilbur ate his breakfast, Lurvy scratched him gently with a smooth stick. "Wait a minute," cried Avery. "Look at this." He pointed to the blue tag on Uncle's pen. "This pig's won first prize already." The Zuckermans and the Arables stared at the tag. Mrs. Zuckerman began to cry. Nobody said a word. They just stared at the tag. Then they stared at Uncle. Then they stared at the tag again. Lurvy took out an enormous handkerchief and blew his nose very loud. So loud, in fact, the noise was heard by stable boys over at the horse barn. "Can I have some money?" asked Fern. "I want to go out on the midway." "You stay right where you are," said her mother. Tears came to Fern's eyes.
"What's everyone crying about?"
said Mr. Zuckerman.
"Let's get busy, Edith. Bring the buttermilk."
Mrs. Zuckerman wiped her eyes with the handkerchief. She went to the truck and came back with a gallon jar of buttermilk. "Bath time," said Zuckerman cheerfully. He and Mrs. Zuckerman and Avery climbed into Wilbur's pen. Avery slowly poured buttermilk on Wilbur's head and back, and it trickled down his sides and cheeks. Mr. and Mrs. Zuckerman rubbed it into his hair and skin. Passersby stopped to watch. Pretty soon a crowd had gathered. Wilbur grew beautifully white and smooth. The morning sun shone through his pink ears. "Isn't he as big as the pig next door?" remarked one bystander. "But he's cleaner. That's what I like."
"So do I,"
said another man. "He's humble, too," said a woman reading the sign on the web. Everyone who visited the pig pen had a good word to say about Wilbur. Everyone admired the web, and of course, nobody noticed Charlotte. Suddenly, a voice was heard on the loudspeaker. "Attention, please," it said. "Will Mr. Homer Zuckerman bring his famous pig to the judge's booth in front of the grandstand? A special award will be made there in 20 minutes. Everyone is invited to attend. Crate your pig, please, Mr. Zuckerman, and report to the judge's booth promptly." For a moment after this announcement, the Arables and the Zuckermans were unable to speak or move. Then Avery picked up a handful of straw and threw it high in the air and gave a loud yell. The straw fluttered down like confetti into Fern's hair. Mr. Zuckerman hugged Mrs. Zuckerman. Mr. Arable kissed Mrs. Arable. Avery kissed Wilbur. Lurvy shook hands with everybody. Fern hugged her mother. Avery hugged Fern. Mrs. Arable hugged Mrs. Zuckerman. Up overhead in the shadows of the ceiling, Charlotte crouched unseen, her front legs encircling her head sack. Her heart was not beating as strongly as usual, and she felt weary and old. But she was sure at last that she'd saved Wilbur's life, and she felt peaceful and content.
"We have no time to lose," shouted Mr. Zuckerman. "Lurvy, help me with the crate."
"Can I have some money?" asked Fern. "You wait," said Mrs. Arble. "Can't you see everyone's busy?"
"Put that empty buttermilk jar in the truck,"
commanded Mr. Arble. Avery grabbed the jar and rushed to the truck. "Does my hair look all right?" asked Mrs. Zuckerman.
"Looks fine,"
snapped Mr. Zuckerman as he and Lurvy set down the crate in front of Wilbur. "You didn't even look at my hair," said Mrs. Zuckerman.
"You're right, Edith,"
said Mr. Arble.
"Just keep calm."
Templeton, asleep in the straw, heard the commotion and awoke. He didn't know exactly what was going on, but when he saw the men shoving Wilbur into the crate, he made his mind up to go along. He watched his chance when no one was looking and crept into the crate and buried himself in the straw at the bottom.
"All ready, boys,"
cried Mr. Zuckerman.
"Let's go."
He and Mr. Arble and Lurvy and Avery grabbed the crate and boosted it over the side of the pen and up into the truck. Fern jumped aboard and sat on top of the crate. She still had straw in her hair and looked very pretty and excited. Mr. Arble started the motor. Everyone climbed in, and they drove off to the judge's booth in front of the grandstand. As they passed the Ferris wheel, Fern gazed up at it and wished she was at the topmost car with Henry Fussy at her side. Girl really fell for... I don't know who Henry Fussy is, but she really fell for him. That's the end of the chapter. Electric, can you tell me a story from Norse mythology? If it's very short, you can tell people in chat. And if it's appropriate as well. Might not be the time for it, though. If it's a long one, maybe, like, link it. In case anyone wants to read it. Just, like, no spamming the chat with it if it is long. That rat is full of gluttony. Yeah, I'm very scared of, like, the moment Wilbur realizes Charlotte's dying. 'Cause she is, obviously. Spoiler alert, the spider's gonna die, but... I know, it's probably gonna be emotional. I care about this spider. And she cares about the pig. But I'll take a drink, just massage my throat a little bit, and then we'll go on to chapter 20. Page 161. About 30 pages left. We got this. Oh, you drank buttermilk one time thinking it was normal milk? Oh no, it's very different. It's, because like when you make butter, you like churn it a lot, and then like you get kind of like some milk left over. That's what buttermilk is. I think, if I'm remembering correct. You were 13. No, I feel like everyone has that moment where it's like, unless like you grow up on a farm or like know a lot about homesteading, it's just something you don't really think about. And you're just like, yeah, it's like, it's somewhere between butter and milk, but it's still milk. All I know is it makes good pancakes. Sorry, I've got hiccups. All right, chapter 20, The Hour of Triumph. I might be getting quieter as well. I'm sorry. I'm going to try and lock in and finish this book. Chapter 20, Hour of Triumph. Special announcement, said the loudspeaker in a pompous voice. The management of the fair takes great pleasure in presenting Mr. Homer L. Zuckerman and his famous pig. The truck bearing this extraordinary animal is now approaching the infield. Kindly stand back and give the truck room to proceed. In a few moments, the pig will be unloaded in the special judging ring in front of the grandstand, where a special award will be made. Will the crowd please make way and let the truck pass? Thank you. Wilbur trembled as he heard this speech. He felt happy but dizzy. The truck crept along slowly in a low speed. Crowds of people surrounded it, and Mr. Arble had to drive very carefully in order not to run over anyone. At last, he managed to reach the judge's stand. Avery jumped out and lowered the tailgate. I'm scared to death, whispered Mrs. Zuckerman. Hundreds of people are looking at us. Cheer up. Cheer up, replied Mrs. Arble. This is fun. Unload your pig, please, said the loudspeaker. All together now, boys, said Mr. Zuckerman. Several men stepped forward from the crate to help lift the crate. Several men stepped forward from the crowd to help lift the crate. Avery was the busiest helper of all. Tuck in your shirt, Avery, cried Mrs. Zuckerman, and tighten your belt. Your pants are coming down. Can't you see I'm busy? Replied Avery in disgust. Look, cried Fern, pointing. There's Henry. She does not care about this pig at all anymore. Don't shout, Fern, said her mother, and don't point. Can I please have some money? Asked Fern. Henry invited me to go on the Ferris wheel again, only I don't think he has any money left. He ran out of money. Mrs. Arble opened her handbag. Here, she said. Here's 40 cents. Now don't get lost, and be back at our regular meeting place by the pig pen very soon. Fern raced off, ducking and dodging for the crowd in search of Henry. The Zuckerman's pig is now being taken from his crate, boomed the voice on the loudspeaker. "Stand by for an announcement." Templeton crouched under the straw at the bottom of the crate. "What a load of nonsense," muttered the rat. "What a lot of fuss about nothing." Over in the pig pen, silent and alone, Charlotte rested. Her front 2 legs embraced the egg sack. Charlotte could hear everything that was said on the loudspeaker. The words gave her courage. This was her hour of triumph. As Wilbur came out of the crate, the crowd clapped and cheered. Mr. Zuckerman took off his cap and bowed. Lurvy pulled his big handkerchief from his pocket and wiped the sweat from the back of his neck. Avery knelt in the dirt by Wilbur's side, busy stroking him and showing off. Mrs. Zuckerman and Mrs. Arable stood on the running board of the truck. "Ladies and gentlemen," said the loudspeaker, "we now present Mr. Homer L. Zuckerman's distinguished pig. The fame of this unique animal has spread to far corners of the earth, attracting many valuable tourists to our great state. Many of you recall the never-to-be-forgotten day last summer when the writing appeared mysteriously on the spider's web at the Zuckerman's barn, calling attention of all and sundry to the fact that this pig was completely out of the ordinary. The miracle has never fully been explained, although learned men have visited the Zuckerman's pig pen to study and observe the phenomenon. In the last analysis, we simply know we are dealing with supernatural forces here, and we should all feel proud and grateful. In the words of the spider's web, ladies and gentlemen, this is some pig." Wilbur blushed. He stood perfectly still and tried to look his best. "This magnificent animal," continued the loudspeaker, "is truly terrific. Look at him, ladies and gentlemen. Note the smoothness and whiteness of his coat. Observe the spotless skin, the healthy pink glow of the ears and snouts." "It's the buttermilk," replied Mrs. Arable to Mrs. Zuckerman. "Note the general radiance of the animal. Then remember this day when the word radiant appeared clearly on the web. Whence came this mysterious writing? Not from the spider, we can rest assured of that. Spiders are very clever at weaving their webs, but needless to say, spiders can't write." "Oh, they can't they?" muttered Charlotte to herself. "Ladies and gentlemen," continued the loudspeaker, I must not take any more of your valuable time. On behalf of the governors of the fair, I have the honor of awarding a special prize of $25 to Mr. Zuckerman, together with a handsome bronze medal suitably engraved in token of our appreciation of the part played by this pig, this radiant, this terrific, this humble pig, in attracting so many visitors to our great county fair." Wilbur had been feeling dizzier and dizzier through this long complimentary speech. When he finally heard the crowd begin to cheer and clap again, he suddenly fainted away. His legs collapsed and his mind went blank, and he fell to the ground unconscious. "What's wrong?" asked the loudspeaker. "What's going on, Zuckerman? What's troubling your pig?" Avery was kneeling by Wilbur's head, stroking him. Mr. Zuckerman was dancing about, fanning him with his cap. "He's all right," cried Mr. Zuckerman. "He gets these spells. He's modest and can't stand praise." Same. "Well, we can't give a prize to a dead pig," said the loudspeaker. "It's never been done." "He isn't dead," hollered Zuckerman. "He's fainted. He gets embarrassed easily. Run some water, Lurvy." Lurvy sprang from the judge's ring and disappeared. Templeton poked his head from the straw. He noticed that the end of Wilbur's tail was within reach. Templeton grinned. "I'll tend to this," he chuckled. He took Wilbur's tail in his mouth and bit it, just as hard as he could bite. The pain revived Wilbur. In a flash, he was back on his feet. "Ouch!" he screamed. "Hooray!" The crowd cheered. "He's up! The pig's up! Good work, Zuckerman! That's some pig!" Everyone was delighted. Mr. Zuckerman was the most pleased of all. He sighed with relief. Nobody had seen Templeton. The rat had done his work well. And now one of the judges climbed into the ring with the prizes. He handed Mr. Zuckerman 2 $10 bills and a $5 bill. Then he tied the medal around Wilbur's neck. Then he shook hands with Mr. Zuckerman, while Wilbur blushed. Avery put out his hand, and the Judge shook hands with him too. What has Avery done? He's done nothing. Why is he... Oh, whatever. The crowd cheered. The photographer took Wilbur's picture. A great feeling of happiness swept over the Zuckermans and the Arables. This was the greatest moment in a Zuckerman's life. It was deeply satisfying to win a prize in front of a lot of people. As Wilbur was being shoved back into the crate, Lurvy came charging through the crowd, carrying a pail of water. His eyes had a wild look. Without hesitating a second, he dashed the water at Wilbur. In his excitement, he missed his aim, and the water splashed all over Zuckerman and Avery. They got soaking wet. "For goodness sakes," bellowed Mr. Zuckerman, who was really drenched. "What ails you, Lurvy? Can't you see the pig's all right?" "You asked for water," said Lurvy meekly. "I didn't ask for a shower bath," said Mr. Zuckerman. The crowd roared with laughter. Finally, Mr. Zuckerman had a laugh too. And of course, Avery was tickled to find himself so wet, and he immediately started to act like a clown. He pretended he was taking a shower bath. He made faces and danced around and rubbed imaginary soap under his armpits. Then he dried himself with an imaginary towel. "Avery, stop it," cried his mother. "Stop showing off." But the crowd loved it. Avery heard nothing but applause. He liked being a clown in the ring, with everyone watching in front of a grandstand. When he discovered that there was still a little water left in the bottom of the pail, he raised the pail high in the air and dumped the water on himself and made faces. The children in the grandstand screamed with appreciation. At last, things calmed down. Wilbur was loaded into the truck. Avery was led from the ring by his mother and placed on the seat of the truck to dry off. The truck, driven by Mr. Arable, crawled slowly back to the pig pen. Avery's wet trousers made a big wet spot on the seat. Chapter end. $25, that's a lot. That's a lot back in the day. This is like from the 70s, 60s. I could buy you a lot of stuff. And congrats on eating dinner, Alex. Congrats. Oh my goodness. Almost at the end. We're on page, I'm going to say 170, so people don't make the obvious joke, because we're a chapter before 170. I think I can make it. I might not be able to make some of the voices, but I should be able to do this. I believe in myself. Check my music. We got half an hour left of the music. We should be good. All right, you guys ready? Chapter 21, Last Day. Charlotte and Wilbur were alone. The families had gone to look for Fern. Templeton was asleep. Wilbur lay resting after the excitement and strain of the ceremony. His medal still hung from his neck. By looking out of the corner of his eye, he could see it. "Charlotte?" asked Wilbur after a while. "Why are you so quiet?" "I like to sit still," she said. "I've always been rather quiet." "Yeah, but you seem specially so today. Do you feel all right?" "A little tired, perhaps, but I feel peaceful. Your success in the ring this morning was, to a small degree, my success. Your future is assured. You'll live secure and safe, Wilbur. Nothing can harm you now. These autumn days will shorten and grow cold. The leaves will shake loose from the trees and fall. Christmas will come, and then the snows of winter. You will live and enjoy the beauty of the frozen world, for you mean a great deal to Zuckerman, and he will not harm you ever. Winter will pass, the days will lighten, the ice will melt in the pasture pond, the song sparrow will return and sing, frogs will awake, and warm winds will blow again. All these sights and sounds and smells will be yours to enjoy, Wilbur. This lovely world, these precious days." Charlotte stopped. A moment later, a tear came to Wilbur's eye. "Oh, Charlotte," he said, "to think that when I first met you, I thought you were cruel and bloodthirsty." When he recovered from his emotions, he spoke again. "Why did you do it all for me?" he asked. "I don't deserve it. I've never done anything for you." "You have been my friend," replied Charlotte. "That in itself is a tremendous thing. I wove my webs for you because I liked you. After all, what's a life anyway? We're born, we live a little while, we die. The spider's life can't help being something of a mess, with all this trapping and eating flies. By helping you, perhaps I was trying to lift up my life a trifle. Heaven knows anyone's life can stand out a little of that. Well, said Wilbur, I'm no good at making speeches. I haven't got your gift for words. But you saved me, Charlotte, and I'd gladly give my life for you. I really would. I'm sure you would, and I thank you for that generous sentiments. Charlotte, said Wilbur, we're all going home today. The fair's almost over. Won't it be wonderful to get back home in the barn cellar again with the sheep and the geese? Aren't you anxious to get home? For a moment, Charlotte said nothing. Then she spoke in a voice so low Wilbur could hardly hear her words. I will not be going back to the barn, she said. Wilbur leapt to his feet. Not going back? He cried. Charlotte, what are you talking about? I'm done for, she replied. In a day or two, I'll be dead. I haven't even the strength to climb down into the crate. I doubt if I have enough silk in my spinnerets to lower me to the ground. Hearing this, Wilbur threw himself down in an agony of pain and sorrow. Great sobs racked his body. He heaved and grunted with desolation. Charlotte, he moaned. Charlotte, my true friend. Come now, let's not make a scene, said the spider. Be quiet, Wilbur. Stop thrashing about. But I can't stand it, shouted Wilbur. I won't leave you alone here to die. If you're gonna stay here, I shall stay here too. Don't be ridiculous, said Charlotte. You can't stay here. Zuckerman and Lurvy and John Arable and the others will be back any minute now, and they'll shove you into the crate and away you'll go. Besides, it wouldn't make any sense for you to stay. There'll be no one to feed you. The fairgrounds will soon be empty and deserted. Wilbur was in a panic. He raced round and round the pen. Suddenly, he had an idea. He thought of the egg sack and the 514 little spiders that would hatch in spring. If Charlotte herself was unable to go home to the barn, he must at least take her children along. Wilbur rushed to the front of the pen. He put his front feet up on the top board and gazed around. In the distance, he saw the Arables and the Zuckermans approaching. He knew that he would have to act quickly. Where's Templeton? He demanded. He's in that corner under the straw asleep, said Charlotte. Wilbur rushed over, pushed his strong snout into the rat, and tossed him into the air. Templeton! Screamed Wilbur. Pay attention! The rat, surprised and out of a sound sleep, looked dazed, then disgusted. What kind of monkey shine is this? He growled. Can't a rat catch a wink of sleep without being rudely popped into the air? Listen to me, cried Wilbur. Charlotte's very ill. She only has a short time to live. She can't accompany us home because of her condition. Therefore, it's absolutely necessary I take her egg sack with me. I can't reach it. I can't climb. You're the only one who can get it. There's not a second to be lost. People are coming and they'll be here in no time. Please, 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 Templeton. Climb up and get the egg sack. The rat yawned. He straightened his whiskers. Then he looked up at the egg sack. So, he said in disgust. So is old Templeton to the rescue again, is it? Templeton do this, Templeton do that. Templeton, please run down to the dump, get me a magazine clipping. Templeton, please lend me a piece of string so I can spin a web. Oh, hurry, said Wilbur. Hurry up, Templeton. But the rat was in no hurry. He began imitating Wilbur's voice. So it's hurry up, Templeton, is it? He said. Ho, ho. And what thanks do I ever get for these services? What would I would like to know. Never a kind word for old Templeton. Only abuse and wisecracks and snide remarks. Never a kind word to a rat. Templeton, said Wilbur in desperation. If you don't stop talking and get busy, all will be lost, and I'll die of a broken heart. Please climb up. Templeton lay back in the straw. Lazily, he placed his forepaws behind his head and crossed his knees in an attitude of complete relaxation. Die of a broken heart, he mimicked. How touching, my. I notice that it's always me you come to when you're in trouble, but I never heard of anyone's heart breaking on my account. Oh no, Who cares anything about old Templeton? Get up, screamed Wilbur. Stop acting like a spoiled child. Templeton grinned and laid still. Who made trip after trip to the dump? He asked. Why, it was old Templeton. Who saved Charlotte's life by scaring that horrible boy away with a rotten egg? Bless my soul. Believe it was old Templeton. Who bit your tail and got you back up on your feet after this morning when you fainted in front of the crowd? Old Templeton. Has it ever occurred to you that I'm sick of running errands, doing favors? What do you think I am anyway, a rat of all work? Wilbur was desperate. The people were coming and the rat was failing him. Suddenly he remembered Templeton's fondness for food. Templeton, he said, I'll make you a solemn promise. Get Charlotte's egg sack for me, and from now on, I'll let you eat first whenever Lurvy slops me. I'll let you have free choice of everything in the trough, and I won't touch a thing till you're through. The rat sat up. You mean it? He said. A promise and cross my heart. All right, a deal, said the rat. He walked to the wall and started to climb. His stomach was still swollen from last night's gorge. Groaning and complaining, he pulled himself slowly to the ceiling. He crept along until he reached the egg sack. Charlotte moved aside for him. She was dying, but she still had a little strength to move. Then Templeton bared his long, ugly teeth and began snipping the threads that fastened the sack to the ceiling. Wilbur watched from below. Use extreme care, he said. I don't want a single one of those eggs harmed. Off my mouth, complained the rat. If I would carry my candy. But Templeton worked away at the job and managed to cut off the sack adrift and carry it to the ground, where he dropped it in front of Wilbur. Wilbur heaved a great sigh of relief. Thank you, Templeton, he said. I'll never forget this as long as I live. Neither will I, said the rat, picking his teeth. I feel as though I'd eaten a spool of thread. Welcome home we go. Templeton crept into his crate and buried himself in the straw. He got out of sight just in time. Lurvy and John Arable and Mr. Zuckerman came along at that moment, followed by Mrs. Arable and Mrs. Zuckerman, and Avery and Fern. Wilbur had already decided how he would carry the egg sack. There was only one way possible. He carefully took the little bundle in his mouth and held it on top of his tongue. He remembered what Charlotte had told him, that the sack was waterproof and strong. It felt funny on his tongue and made him drool a little bit. And, of course, he couldn't say anything, but as he was being shoved into the crate, he looked up at Charlotte and gave her a wink. She knew he was saying goodbye in the only way he could, and she knew her children were safe. Goodbye, she whispered. And then she summoned all her strength and waved one of her front legs at him. She never moved again. Next day, as the Ferris wheel was being taken apart, and the racehorses were being loaded into vans, and entertainers were packing up their belongings and driving away in the trailers, Charlotte died. The fairgrounds were soon deserted. Their sheds and buildings were empty and forlorn. The infield was littered with bottles and trash. Nobody of the hundreds of people that had visited the fair knew that a grey spider had played the most important part of all. No one was with her when she died. Chapter end. Man. I'm glad you appreciate the voices I'm trying to put on the burger. The part of what's killing my voice so fast. They're part of what's making my voice die, but we have one more chapter. We're on page 178. I'm gonna finish my drink and lock in. I'm gonna quickly read this chat message in my head. Aw, thank you. I'm non-binary, I'm not a woman, but I'm gonna take the compliment anyway. I take what I can get in this house. People compliment me and call me a woman? Yeah, I am one for this moment now. Okay, let me finish my drink and get on to the last chapter. Scary. Okay. A warm wind. And so Wilbur came home to his beloved manure pile in the barn cellar. It was a strange homecoming. Around his neck he wore a Medal of Honor. In his mouth he held a sack of spider eggs. There was no place like home, Wilbur thought, as he placed Charlotte's 514 unborn children carefully in a safe corner. The barn smelled good. His friends, the sheep, and the geese were glad to see him back. The geese gave him a noisy welcome. "Congratulations," they cried. "Nice work." Mr. Zuckerman took the medal from Wilbur's neck and hung it on a nail over the pig pen, where visitors could examine it. Wilbur himself could look at it whenever he wanted to. In the days that followed, he was very happy. He grew to a great size. He was no longer worried about being killed, for he knew Mr. Zuckerman would keep him as long as he lived. Wilbur often thought of Charlotte. A few strands of her old web still hung in the doorway. Every day Wilbur would stand and look at the torn empty web, and a lump would come to his throat. No one had ever had such a friend. So affectionate, so loyal, and so skillful. The autumn days grew shorter, and Lurvy brought the squashes and pumpkins from the garden and piled them on the barn floor, where they wouldn't get nipped in frosty nights. The maples and birches turned bright colors, and the wind shook them until they dropped their leaves one by one onto the ground. Under the wild apple trees in the pasture, little red apples lay thick on the ground, and the sheep gnawed them, and the geese gnawed them, and the foxes came in the night and sniffed them. One evening, just before Christmas, snow began falling. It covered the house and barn and fields and woods. Wilbur had never seen snow before. When morning came, he went out and plowed the drifts in the yard for the fun of it. Fern and Avery arrived, dragging a sled. They coasted down the lane and out onto the frozen pond in the pasture. "Coasting's the most fun here," said Avery. "The most fun there is," retorted Fern, "is when the Ferris wheel stops and Henry and I are in the top car, and Henry makes the car swing and we see everything for miles and miles and miles." "Goodness, are you still on about that old Ferris wheel?" said Avery in disgust. "The fair was weeks and weeks ago." "I think about it all the time," said Fern, picking snow from her ear. After Christmas, the thermometer dropped to 10 below zero. Cold settled in over the world. The pasture was bleak and frozen. The cows stayed in the barn all the time now, except on sunny mornings when they went out and stood in the backyard in the lee of the straw pile. The sheep stayed near the barn too, for protection. When they were thirsty, they ate snow. The geese hung around the back barnyard the way boys hang around a drugstore. I'm assuming that's like, okay, I know what that is. Not those kind of drugs. And Mr. Zuckerman fed them corn and turnips to keep them cheerful. "Many, many, many thanks," they always said when they saw the food coming. Templeton moved indoors when the winter came. His ratty home underneath the pig trough was too chilly, and he fixed himself a cozy nest in the barn behind the grain bins. He lined it with bits of dirty newspapers and rags, and whenever he found a trinket or a keepsake, he carried it home and stored it there. He continued to visit Wilbur 3 times a day, exactly at mealtime, and Wilbur kept the promise he had made. Wilbur let the rat eat first. Then, when Templeton couldn't hold another mouthful, Wilbur would eat. As a result of overeating, Templeton grew bigger and fatter than any rat you ever saw. He was gigantic. He was as big as a young woodchuck. The old sheep spoke to him about his size one day. "You would live longer," said the old sheep, "if you ate less." "Wants to live forever," sneered the rat. "I'm naturally a heavy eater, and I get untold satisfaction from the pleasures of the feast." He patted his stomach, grinned at the sheep, and crept upstairs to lie down. All winter, Wilbur watched over Charlotte's egg sack, as though he were guarding his own children. He had scoped out a special place in the manure for the sack, next to the board fence. On very cold nights, he lay so his breath would warm it. For Wilbur, nothing in life was more important than this small, round object. Nothing else mattered. Patiently, he waited the end of winter and the coming of the little spiders. Life is always a rich and steady time when you are waiting for something to happen or hatch. The winter ended at last. "I heard the frogs today," said the old sheep one evening. "Listen, you can hear them now." Wilbur stood still and cocked his ears. From the pond, in shrill chorus, came the voices of hundreds of little frogs. "Springtime," said the old sheep thoughtfully. Another spring. As she walked away, Wilbur saw a new lamb following her. It was only a few hours old. The snow melted and ran away. The streams and ditches bubbled and chattered with rushing water. A sparrow with a streaky breast arrived and sang. The light strengthened. The morning came sooner. Almost every morning there was another new lamb in the sheepfold. The goose was sitting on 9 eggs. The sky seemed wider and a warm wind blew. The last remaining strands of Charlotte's old web floated away and vanished. One fine sunny morning after breakfast, Wilbur stood watching his precious sack. He wasn't thinking anything much. As he stood there, he noticed something move. He stepped closer and stared. A tiny spider crawled from the sack. It was no bigger than a grain of sand, no bigger than the head of a pin. Its body was grey with black stripe underneath. Its legs were grey and tan. It looked just like Charlotte. Wilbur trembled all over when he saw it. The little spider waved at him. Then Wilbur looked more closely. 2 more little spiders crawled out and waved. They climbed round and round on the sack, exploring their new world. Then 3 more little spiders, then 8, then 10. Charlotte's children were here at last. Wilbur's heart pounded. He began to squeal. Then he raced in circles, kicking manure into the air. Then he turned a backflip. Then he planted his front feet and came to a stop in front of Charlotte's children. "Hello there," he said. The first spider said hello, but its voice was so small Wilbur couldn't hear it. "I'm an old friend of your mother's," said Wilbur. "I'm glad to see you. Are you all right? Is everything all right?" The little spiders waved their forelegs at him. Wilbur could see by the way they acted that they were glad to see him. "Is there anything I can get you? Is there anything you need?" The young spiders just waved. For several days and several nights, they crawled here and there, up and down, around and about, waving at Wilbur, trailing tiny drag lines behind them, exploring their new home. There were dozens and dozens of them. Wilbur couldn't count them, but he knew he had a great many new friends. They grew quite rapidly. Soon, each were as big as a BB shot. They made tiny webs near the sack. Then came a quiet morning when Mr. Zuckerman opened the door on the north side. A warm draft of rising air blew softly through the barn cellar. The air smelled sweet, of damp earth, of spruce woods, of the sweet springtime. The baby spiders felt the warm updraft. One spider climbed to the top of the fence. Then it did something that came as a great surprise to Wilbur. The spider stood on its head, pointed its spinnerets in the air, and let loose a cloud of fine silk. The silk formed a balloon. As Wilbur watched, the spider let go of the fence and rose into the air. "Goodbye!" it said as it sailed through the doorway. "Wait a minute," screamed Wilbur. "Where do you think you're going?" But the spider was already out of sight. Then another baby spider crawled on top of the fence, stood on its head, made a balloon, and sailed away. Then another spider. Then another. The air was soon filled with tiny balloons, each balloon carrying a spider. Wilbur was frantic. Charlotte's babies were disappearing at a great rate. "Come back, children," he cried. "Goodbye," they called. "Goodbye, goodbye." At last, one little spider took time enough to stop and talk to Wilbur before making its balloon. "We're leaving here on the warm updraft. There's a moment before setting forth. We are aeronauts, and we're going to go out into the world and make webs for ourselves." "But where?" asked Wilbur. "Wherever the wind takes us. High, low, near, far, east, west, north, south. We take the breeze and we go as we please." "Are you all going?" asked Wilbur. "You can't all go. I'd be left alone with no friends. Your mother wouldn't want that to happen, I'm sure." The air was now so full of balloonists that the barn cellar almost looked as though a mist had gathered. Balloons by the dozen were rising, circling, and drifting through the door, sailing off on the gentle wind. Cries of "Goodbye, goodbye" came weakly to Wilbur's ears. He couldn't bear to watch any more. In sorrow, he sank to the ground and closed his eyes. This seemed like the end of the world to be deserted by Charlotte's children. Wilbur cried himself to sleep. When he woke, it was late afternoon. He looked at the egg sack. It was empty. He looked into the air. The balloonists were all gone. Then he walked drearily to the doorway where Charlotte's web used to be. He was standing there thinking of her when he heard a small voice. "Salutations," it said. I'm up here.
So am I,
Said another tiny voice.
So am I,
Said a third voice. 3 of us are staying. We like this place and we like you. Wilbur looked up. At the top of the doorway were 3 small webs being constructed. On each web, working busily, was one of Charlotte's daughter. Can I take this to mean, asked Wilbur, that you're definitely deciding to live here in the barn cellar? And I'm gonna have 3 friends? You are indeed, said the spiders. What are your names, please? Asked Wilbur, trembling with joy. I'll tell you my name, replied the first little spider, if you'll tell me why you're trembling. I'm trembling with joy, said Wilbur. Then my name's Joy, said the first spider. What's your mother's middle initial? Asked the second spider. A, said Wilbur. Then my name's Arena, said the spider. How about me? Asked the third spider. Will you just pick something nice and sensible for me? Something not too long, not too fancy, and not too dumb. Wilbur thought hard. Nellie, he suggested. Fine, I like that very much, said the third spider. You may call me Nellie. She daintily fastened her orb line and next spoke of the web. Wilbur's heart brimmed with happiness. He felt that he should make a short speech on this very important occasion. Joy, Arena, Nellie. Arania, I think it's actually, not Arena. Arania, Nellie, he began. Welcome to the barn cellar. You've chosen a hollowed doorway from which to spring your webs. I think it's only fair to tell you that I was devoted to your mother. I owe my very life to her. She was brilliant, beautiful, loyal to her end. I shall always treasure her memory. To you, her daughters, I pledge my friendship forever and ever. I pledge mine, said Joy. I do too, said Ariana. And so do I, said Nellie, who had just managed to catch a small gnat. It was a happy day for Wilbur, and many more happy, tranquil days followed. As time went on, and the months and years came and went, he was never without friends. Fern did not come regularly to the barn anymore. She was growing up, and was careful to avoid childish things like sitting on a milk stool near a pigeon. But Charlotte's children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, year after year, lived in the doorway. Each spring there were new little spiders hatching out to take the place of the old. Most of them sailed away on their balloons, but always 2 or 3 stayed and set up housekeeping in the doorway. Mr. Zuckerman took fine care of Wilbur for all the rest of his days, and the pig was often visited by friends and admirers, for nobody ever forgot the year of his triumph and the miracle of the web. Life in the barn was very good. Night and day, winter and summer, spring and fall, dull days and bright days. It was the best place to be, thought Wilbur. This warm, delicious cellar with the garrulous geese, the changing seasons, the heat of the sun, the passage of swallows and the nearness of rats, the sameness of sheep, the love of spiders, and the smell of manure, and the glory of everything. Wilbur never forgot Charlotte. Although he loved her children and grandchildren dearly, none of the new spiders ever quite took her place in his heart. She was in a class by herself. It's not often that someone comes along with a true friend and a good writer. Charlotte was both. The end. That was it. The book's done. What do we do now? And can we know what Charlotte's web to? No, I need to go now. I'm sleepy. I need to rest my voice. I can't talk to you guys anymore. My mom said I can't talk to you anymore. Sorry. We have to go find someone else to bother. Thank you everyone for coming out. I had an absolute blast. I'm surprised so many of you were here listening to me yap about a book. But thank you for being here. We'll be back tomorrow morning at around 9:30 a.m. PST. We're going to be playing some Kingdom Hearts at 358 days over 2. We're playing that on the Nintendo DS. On Monday, we'll be doing... Thank you for the big emote burger. On Monday, we'll be doing some Monster Hunter. I'm going to be learning how to play with some other Capcom creators teaching me the ways. It's like a Capcom event, but I'm streaming my POV on my channel. That stream, I probably won't be yapping at you guys too much. I'll be dono-walling you a bit, I think, just so I can focus on learning and talking to the people who are helping me learn. Monday night, we have D&D at the regular time for Kingdom Hearts. Tuesday, we'll have more D&D for Granblue at the similar D&D time, which means I'm going to probably take Wednesday, Thursday off maybe, and then come back Friday. I'll think about it. I'll think about how many days I'm going to need off from 2 back-to-back D&D sessions. I'll have to think about it. But I had a lot of fun tonight. I'm going to see who we can raid into. Oh, we can raid into one of the people who will be helping, who will be playing Monster Hunter with. They're doing a partner push. It is Reiko Macchiato. She is playing Warframe. She looks very cute. Thank you for the bunk in the stretch. I'll try and find another book for next week to read, either a book or a short story, because I think the reading streams are fun. I think it's like a fun little either Friday or Saturday night activity. Maybe I'll keep it a Friday night. Yeah. I'll do it Friday night again. I might try and look for something shorter, perchance. The Hungry Caterpillar. Don't tempt me with a good time. That might be a bit too short, but yeah. Sorry if I'm like repeating stuff. My brain is turned off and my voice is absolutely giving out. My voice is giving out like the Giving Tree. But yeah, have a wonderful night. I don't have a raid message and I can never think of them. So just say hi or say something nice to them when we raid in. Say something nice when we raid in. Have a good night. I don't have an ending stream. So I'm just gonna filibuster for a second. Hope to catch you later. I hope I don't smell you later. You don't have to go home. You cannot stay here legally. My house is not up to code to have so many guests. My house can fit a maximum of 3 people and 1 cat. And speaking of cat, he's gonna want to come downstairs, so I gotta go get him. All right, goodbye. Bye 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 bye.